Chapter 301. He might not have felt anything when he said that, but to the others, it was no less than a bolt from the blue. It was enough to make them lose their minds. Xianxia's voice was not soft. The woman who stood on the treetop like a noble empress clearly heard it, but she still could not believe it. She asked in a trembling voice, "What did he say his name was?" The two women behind her turned pale. Their eyes lost focus as they mumbled weakly, "Xianxia. He's Xianxia, the disciple of the disciplinary envoy." Instantly, the noblewoman's face turned ashen and she lost all her temperament. "You're Xianxia?" Ting Po's face was filled with terror. "Who cares what his name is? He won't be leaving here alive today. Don't show any mercy, old woman. Kill him." Old freak Ting did not learn his lesson after suffering a loss. Seeing that Xianxia had already put away his flying sword, he swung his two whips with a ferocious expression and lashed at the air. "No, stop." A few screams rang out at the same time. Unfortunately, old freak Ting had already made his move. The disciple of the disciplinary envoy had already announced his name, but someone still dared to make a move. Wasn't this a death wish? It was fine if old freak Ting was courting death, but according to the disciplinary envoy's temper, everyone present would probably be implicated. No one would be able to escape. Ting Po was completely flustered. The three women on the treetop were confused. The four women's minds were blank. They looked on dumbly and forgot to stop old freak Ting. As the vine whips approached, Xianxia narrowed his eyes. Green flames surged around his body, illuminating the gloomy sky with a dazzling green brilliance. There was a person standing in the middle of the green flames. It was a very strange scene. Ting Po and the three women were dumbstruck, and their hearts surged with boundless sorrow. They all asked themselves, how could the punishment envoy's disciple be an ordinary person? Old freak Ting was shocked to see the strange condition on Xianxia's body. In addition to that, he heard Grandma Ting's cries from afar. He had a bad feeling about this. He was just about to pull back his whips when he saw Xianxia shoot out two balls of azure flames. In a moment of desperation, he retracted his whip to protect himself, wanting to deflect the incoming flames. Who would have thought that as soon as the two whips touched the two balls of green flames, it was as if the whips had been doused with kerosene. The green flames quickly spread from the tips of the whips all the way down, turning the two whips into ashes. "Ah!" Old Monster Ting let out a blood-curdling scream. How could the vine whip, which was connected to his body, withstand the pain of the azure fire? However, he hardened his heart. Before the fire reached him, his arms, which had transformed into two whips, once again broke off to protect himself. After losing his limbs several times, old Monster Ting's essence was greatly damaged. He trembled in pain as he said, "Old woman, my essence is too exhausted. I can't attack anymore. Help me kill him." "Shut up." Ting Pa shook her head miserably. Her face was filled with pain as the whip in her hand fell to the ground. Speechless, she knelt before Xianxia. "Old woman, you..." Old Monster Ting finally realized that something was wrong. He looked at Xianxia in horror, then at Ting Pa. When the cries rang out, Xianxia immediately noticed the three people on the treetop. From the actions of Ting Pa and the others, he could tell that his identity was no longer a secret. Xianxia withdrew the flames around his body and coldly glanced at the forest. He snorted and said, "Do you still need me to invite you over?" The three figures quickly flew over and knelt down as soon as they landed. The woman leading them said in fear and trepidation, "Lady Mu greets Mr. We did not know that Mr. was here. Please forgive us." "Greetings, Yao Monarch." When the woman leading them arrived, old Monster Ting immediately knelt down and kowtowed. However, he did not expect that the person he was kowtowing to was his enemy. He was stunned. Ting Po, who was kneeling beside him, began to weep softly. The three women's cultivation levels were not low. From the moment they arrived to the moment they knelt down, they were so fast that Xianxia did not manage to see their faces clearly. This made Xianxia, who originally wanted to see if the three women were beautiful, a little depressed. He could only put away the flying sword beneath his feet and descend to the ground. He said in a deep voice, "The three of you get up." He did not ask old Monster Ting or Ting Po to get up. After the three of them got up, they did not dare to raise their heads to look at him. Xianxia could only say again, "You are the Yao Monarch, Lady Mu? I want to see you. The three of you raise your heads." This little demon is indeed Lady Mu. Lady Mu bowed. She did not dare to call herself a Yao monarch in front of Yu Qianqiu. The three women slowly raised their heads. Their panicked eyes also took the opportunity to observe Yu Qianqiu. Her temperament was good and she could be considered beautiful. Unfortunately, she could not compare to Bai Suzhen. Her figure was not great either, and she could not compare to Wu Lixue and the Temptress of 100 Charms. After looking at the three of them, Yu Qianqiu came to this conclusion. However, this feeling of raising one's head as a Yao monarch in the final stages of the tribulation transcendence was not bad. If he dared to say such words in the outside world, he would definitely be hunted down. Yu Qianqiu looked at old monster Ting and Ting Po with slight disappointment. His gaze gradually turned cold. It was time to settle the score with these two. He slowly walked in front of the two and said coldly, "Old monster Ting, have I seen you before?" Old monster Ting shivered and said fearfully, "No. Then have I offended you before?" "No. Since I have never seen you before and have never offended you, why did you want to kill me when I saw you fighting with that peach blossom spirit?" I was confused for a moment. I didn't know it was Mr. Please forgive me, Mr. Old monster Ting kowtowed repeatedly. In fact, he still did not know who this Yu Qianqiu was. However, the actions of Lady Mu and the others were very clear. He could only blame himself for being obsessed with that peach blossom spirit for the past few days. He did not even pay attention to the most important matters in the demon domain. Lady Mu and the others stared at him in unison. So, it was this guy who had caused all this trouble. But of all people, he had to provoke Bai Chongqun's disciple. Wasn't this the same as dragging everyone to die with him? One could imagine the expressions of the women at the moment. "I didn't provoke you. You provoked me first. I'm not wrongly accusing you, am I?" Yu Qianqiu's tone became gloomy. His eyes shone with a green light, causing Lady Mu and the others to shudder. "No." Old monster Ting replied weakly. Then he continued to kowtow and beg for mercy. Yu Qianqiu's green eyes turned to Ting Pa. He snorted coldly and said, "I have just cultivated a set of sword kinesis techniques. Since I met you two, I can use it to practice. Do you two think that I am no match for you?" "We don't dare." "No." The two of them kowtowed in unison. Yu Qianqiu did not care whether the two of them were telling the truth or not. He stretched out his palm and a ball of green flames burst out. A powerful heat suddenly spread in all directions. The two of them immediately sat on the ground, feeling suffocated. Lady Mu and the others could not help but take a few steps back in shock. Their expressions were uncertain. They all had the same thought. What a powerful flame. Even with their cultivation at the end of the tribulation stage, they could not get close to it. "If I wanted to kill you too, it would be as easy as flipping my hand," Yu Qianqiu said indifferently as he held the ball of green flames. This time the two of them really believed him. Old monster Ting shook his head with a pained expression. He withstood the irresistible heat and knelt down with great difficulty. He kowtowed and said, "Mister, this matter was caused by me alone. It has nothing to do with Ting Pa. This lowly demon is willing to die as an apology. I beg Mister to spare Ting Pa." "Old man." Ting Pa looked at old monster Ting and cried out in relief. Her man was willing to sacrifice his life to save her at the most critical moment. All of the previous unhappiness instantly disappeared. Old monster Ting was still kowtowing and begging for mercy. "It's too late." Yu Qianqiu lightly spat out these two words. He turned his hand around and clenched his fist. The green flames surged and instantly engulfed the two of them. In that instant, Ting Pa suddenly threw herself onto old monster Ting, who was still kowtowing. It was as if she wanted to block the flames for her man. However, all she got in return were two miserable screams. As Yu Qianqiu indifferently sucked the green flames back into his palm, two piles of ashes appeared on the ground. A gust of wind blew them up and they swirled away. Lady Mu and the other two's pupils shrank. They were shocked by the tyrannical power of the green flames. It had actually burned Ting Po and old monster Ting to ashes in an instant. Who said that plants were heartless? Yu Qianqiu stood with his hands behind his back and watched the ashes float away. Then he swept his gaze over the green vines and coldly snorted. "I originally wanted to eradicate the two of you, but seeing that you two were so sentimental before you died, I'll let you two be ignorant plants and let the green vines entangle you until you wither. That's me being merciful." "Lady Mu." Yu Qianqiu slowly turned around and said, There's a peach blossom tree demon. Please capture him for me. I want him alive. Chapter 302. It was a large wooden house built against the mountain. It looked like a bandit's stronghold and it was very old. In the middle of the house there was a gurgling stream. This is the place where the ruler of this area, the Demon King Lady Mu, lives? Xianxia couldn't believe it at first. He had never seen the other ghost king of the demon ghost domain, but he had seen Meng Yan's underground palace. That imposing manner was like that of a local tyrant. This demon king is a little too simple. Could it be that he knows that I'm coming to collect protection fees, so he deliberately made it like this? Damn it, I don't even know how to open my mouth. After Lady Mu confirmed it again and again, he reluctantly believed it. After entering the stronghold, magnolia trees could be seen everywhere. Blooming magnolia were dotted among the green leaves, exuding a fragrance. Along the way they didn't see many people and most of them were women. You only have these few subordinates? Xianxia asked as they walked. Lady Mu, who accompanied him and led the way, replied, Mister, you may not know this, but the spirits of plants are not like the spirits of animals. It's not suitable for them to leave their bodies for a long time. Usually I only summon them when there's something. I'm being silly. I'll summon them immediately to greet Mister. That's not what I meant. There's no need to go through so much trouble. Xianxia acted like a leader inspecting his work. He waved his hand, suddenly pulled his collar and sniffed, saying, I was sprayed by the man-eating flowers. Do you have a place to take a bath? Yes. Lady Mu asked, Mister, do you want to use a clear spring or a hot spring? You have a hot spring here? Then let's use a hot spring. As soon as Xianxia finished speaking, Lady Mu immediately whispered to him, probably arranging for someone to prepare it. After a while the two came to the largest main hall in the stronghold. It was probably the place where Lady Mu was in charge. The simple and exquisite decoration and the thick pink velvet carpet all reflected a woman's taste. Madame Mu stretched out her hand to lead the way. Mister, please follow me. Xianxia nodded his head and followed her out of the back hall. The scene in front of him suddenly became a little more elegant. There was a meandering stream and a few small wooden bridges across it. It gave off the feeling of a small bridge, flowing water and people's houses. Magnolia trees were scattered among them. It was impossible to tell that this was the residence of a demon king. The two of them walked to the front of a cave. The arched semi-oval cave entrance was carved with intricate patterns, all of which were magnolia blooming in various postures. Miss Mu pulled up the pink gauze hanging at the entrance of the cave and said, This is the place for bathing. The conditions are poor, but this is the only place in the entire village that is slightly better. Please don't take offense. Xianxia looked at the pink gauze she had pulled up and asked with a strange expression, Is this where you take a bath? Lady Mu nodded her head calmly. She had no choice. The other places were even more crude and the place she used was the best. Therefore she had no choice but to bring Xianxia there. Xianxia didn't say anything and walked in. A 3-meter-wide bathing pool was in the middle of the stone room. After 2 water infusion troughs from different directions met, water was poured into the pool with a goo-goo sound. With a little effort one could tell that one of the troughs was from a hot spring, while the other was from a clear spring. Presumably, the temperature had been adjusted according to the flow of water. The bright green pool water was slightly steaming, which was very tempting. Xianxia couldn't wait to take off his clothes. Suddenly he remembered that Miss Mu was still by his side. He turned around and tugged at his clothes, saying with a smile, Then I won't stand on ceremony. He signaled for Miss Mu to leave. I'm going to take a bath. Unexpectedly Miss Mu nodded and said, I'll help you take a bath. After saying that she stretched out her hand to help Xianxia take off his clothes. Xianxia was stunned. He immediately waved his hand and said, Miss Mu, you've misunderstood me. That's not what I meant. How could I dare to trouble the Demon King to serve me? You should call 2 servants. Although he was embarrassed to take advantage of Miss Mu, he could still get 2 other women to serve him. That was what he meant. No problem. It's my good fortune to be able to help you take a bath. As Miss Mu spoke, she stretched out her hand again. Xianxia pretended to decline her offer. Under the circumstances where it was difficult to refuse, he was stripped naked and went into the water naked. The water temperature was just right. Yu Qianchou lay comfortably in the pool and let out a moan. He rested his head on his pillow and closed his eyes to enjoy the feeling. Suddenly he heard the sound of water splashing. When he opened his eyes he saw that Miss Mu had also stripped herself naked. Her naked body was exposed. 3 words immediately appeared in Yu Qianchou's mind. Lover's bath. He wants to seduce me. This was his next thought. However, when he looked at the expression on Miss Mu's face, he found that she was calm and her eyes were calm. After she leaned over, she did not make any other pretentious movements. Her slender fingers lifted his feet and began to massage his feet. Moreover, her technique was very professional. It seemed that she often did this kind of thing. Yu Qianchou found it strange. How could a dignified demon king do this often? He couldn't help but ask, Miss Mu, how did you become so skilled? Miss Mu smiled and said, you may not know this, but I served the previous demon king for more than 300 years. Of course I'm skilled. Oh, Yu Qianchou said, then closed his eyes to enjoy it again. Since Miss Mu herself did not care, he did not care either. At first he still had some perverted thoughts, but they were replaced by the comfortable kneading and moving fingertips. Speaking of which, he still had a certain immunity to beautiful women. The key was that the women he had were all top-notch goods. They had good figures and looks. With Miss Mu's physical condition, she really did not have much attraction for him. The strength of her fingertips was just right. They wandered around every part of his body. After a while, Yu Qianchou actually fell asleep comfortably. He did not know how long he had slept, but suddenly he was gently woken up. Miss Mu said softly, Sir, the peach blossom demon has been caught, and the ghost king Yan, who is in charge of the local area, is also waiting to see you in the main hall. Yu Qianchou's sleepy eyes immediately became clear. He climbed out of the water without hesitation and said, let's go and see. Miss Mu followed him out of the water. She took a cotton towel from somewhere and helped him wipe his body. The former enjoyed it calmly. His thinking was very simple. Since it was already like this, there was no need to worry about the two of them being willing. Yu Qianchou summoned a new set of clothes out of thin air. Miss Mu was slightly stunned when she saw it, but immediately helped him put it on. She also quickly put on her clothes. Your technique is very good, the massage is very comfortable. On the way to the main hall, Yu Qianchou suddenly said with a smile. How many people could enjoy having a bath with a demon king at the end of the crossing calamity stage and having him give him a massage? Just thinking about it made him feel good. It is my blessing to be able to serve, sir. Sir likes it, you can come often. I can't ask for more. Miss Mu also smiled. If she could have a good relationship with Bai Changchun's disciple, there was naturally no need to mention the benefits in the future. I'm really afraid that I can't help but come often. I can't ask for more. The two of them went to the main hall with smiles on their faces. As soon as they came in, Yu Qianchou's face darkened. He saw the peach blossom demon kneeling there. A beautiful woman wrapped in green muslin in the hall saw that Yu Qianchou's expression was not good. She stole a glance at Miss Mu, who smiled slightly. She immediately knelt down and said, Yun pays respect to sir. Yu Qianchou glanced at her coldly and raised his hand to signal her to get up. He walked straight to Peach Blossom and sneered, Peach Blossom, do you still recognize me? How could Peach Blossom not recognize him? She did not know why she was caught and brought here. She was in a panic. Now that she saw him walking out with the Demon King and the Ghost King kneeling down to greet him, she immediately realized that she had made a big mistake. She knelt down and kowtowed repeatedly, I know I was wrong, I know I was wrong. I saved you, but you left me and ran away secretly. Hey, I hate ungrateful people the most in my life. Get up. It's useless to bow again. Yu Qianchou stared at her and said. Peach Blossom hugged his leg and begged bitterly, Sir, forgive me this time. I won't dare to do it again. I asked you to get up, didn't you hear me? Yu Qianchou's voice was very cold. Peach Blossom stood up shakily. Tears were already flowing down her face. She shook her head and cried, I've been cultivating for thousands of years. I transformed into a human form and was alone. I didn't know Sir's ability at that time. When I saw Ting Po, I was really scared. Her voice stopped abruptly. Yu Qianchou suddenly poked her chest with both hands. Peach Blossom opened her mouth wide and her eyes bulged. Soon, her eyes shrunk deeply and smoke began to come out of her 7 orifices. Then the skin all over her body rapidly shrank. Suddenly, a blue flame emerged from her body, and she disappeared without a trace in an instant. You have eyes but failed to see the situation clearly. Since you can't see the situation clearly, why do you still transform into a human form and continue to be a 1,000-year-old peach tree? Yu Qianzhou opened his 5 fingers indifferently and sucked the blue flame back into his palm. Chapter 303. The thick pink carpet was not damaged at all, but there was a pile of ashes. It was hard to believe that such a powerful flame could burn on the carpet without burning it. It could be seen that Yu Qianzhou's ability to control flames had reached an exquisite level. Only Yu Qianzhou himself knew the secret. It was said that playing with fire would cause one to be burned, but he was able to control it freely. The Demon King Miss Mu was a little better. She had already seen the fate of Tingpo and her husband. But the Ghost King Yan was a little creeped out. Yu Qianzhou had turned the demoness into ashes with a gentle point of his finger. She thought that she could easily kill the demoness, but it was absolutely impossible for her to turn a person's bones into ashes with a flick of her finger. In particular, the aura emitted by the blue flame was extremely young. Without even trying, she already knew that it could restrain her. The disciple of the torturer was indeed extraordinary. The way he killed without batting an eye was very similar to the style of a torturer. Yan looked at Yu Qianzhou with more and more respect. Yu Qianzhou glanced at Yan, who was standing with her hands behind her back. Although he hated ungrateful people, but to kill a peach blossom here was more or less like killing the chicken to warn the monkey. He wanted to show the female Ghost King that he, the disciple of the torture envoy, was not someone to be trifled with. He walked unceremoniously to the chair in the middle of the main hall and sat down. Looking at the 2 people standing below, he said, "Since the Demon King and the Ghost King are both here, I will say what I want to say. I have something to ask of you this time. I need a batch of spirit stones. I don't know how many you can give me." Miss Mu smiled and said, "The spirit stones have been prepared. Why did Mr. come here in person?" Yu Qianzhou was startled and said, "What? Did you know I was coming to collect spirit stones?" Miss Mu and Yan looked at each other. The former asked doubtfully, "When Heli was still here, he had set a rule. Did Mr. not know?" "I don't know what rule." Lady Mu explained, "The demon realm is divided into 300 territories, and each territory is controlled by a demon and a ghost. Therefore Healy made a rule that each territory needs to pay 10,000 upper-grade spirit stones every month. At the beginning of every month, the rulers of the 300 territories will send people to deliver the spirit stones to the 1,000 Miles Lake, and Healy will take them all. There is no need for you to go door to door and collect them." "What?" Yu Qianzhou exclaimed. "Each territory only needs to pay 10,000 upper-grade spirit stones every month?" He still had some words in his heart. "Of Mr. Are you trying to fool me? Just a single piece of land is already frighteningly large. Only you guys can afford to fork out 10,000 a month. Of the territory of the demon realm was already, but it was 10,000 upper-grade spirit stones every month. It's not inappropriate, it's just that." Yu Qianzhou rubbed his chin and hesitated for a moment before saying, "Isn't it a little too little to pay 10,000 high-grade spirit stones per month for each territory? Mr. Tuov of the rule? In that case, how much do you think is appropriate?" "Well," Yu Qianzhou thought to himself. With 300 territories, 10,000 yuan per month was indeed too little. In a year, it would only be a total of 30 million yuan. It was not even as good as the 2 7-star blood orchids that he sold. If it was increased by 100 times, it would be more than 3 billion yuan in a year. That would be a great profit. After thinking for a while, he said, "What do you think? How about 1 million per month from each territory?" "What 1 million? Miss Mu and Yu Yan exclaimed in unison, their faces full of disbelief. Yu Qianzhou's face darkened as he snorted coldly. "What? Is 1 million a lot? There are indeed too many. I reckon that most of the territories won't be able to be handed over." Lady Mu shook her head and said with a wry smile, "Sir, you may not know this, but spirit stones are the rarest thing in the demon ghost territory. Just like our territory, it's difficult to gather 1 million upper-grade spirit stones in a year. Sir, you want us to hand over 1 million upper-grade spirit stones every month. It's not that we don't want to, but we can't." Yu Qianzhou was stunned and asked suspiciously, "Is the demon ghost territory so poor?" In his impression, the demon ghost territory was not only rich in all kinds of rare spirit grasses, but there should also be a lot of spirit stones. In the past he not only got a lot of top-grade spirit stones in the demon ghost territory, but he even got some divine-grade spirit stones. He was too lazy to dig up those upper-grade spirit stones. How could a demon king not even have 1 million upper-grade spirit stones every month? Lady Mu smiled bitterly and said, compared to the human world, the demon ghost territory is indeed very poor. The same demon cultivators on the same cultivation level spend more time in the demon ghost territory than in the human world, and even spend several times more time. Fortunately, the spiritual qi in the demon ghost territory is far more abundant than in the human world. This time Xianxia was a little depressed. He believed that the two women did not have the courage to lie to him. It seemed that his plan to get rich was ruined. He asked with a little unwillingness, could every territory be so poor? Aren't there any rich ones? That might not be the case. Territories with good luck might discover new mines that have yet to be excavated, but the chances are very small. After all, the demon ghost territory has existed for so many years. Furthermore, the ratio of cultivation is far greater than in the human world. Even if a new mine is excavated, the share is also very large. Therefore, there are very few undiscovered spirit stone mines. Most of the territories are searching for missing spirit stones in some old mines. Lady Mu explained. It seemed like it was purely a coincidence that they found the spirit stone mine back then. Yu Qianzhou sat there in silence. Right now he was very concerned about the tens of millions of upper-grade spirit stones that were swallowed by the Wu clan. After a long time he said helplessly, since that is the case, let's follow the old rules. Looking at the sky outside, it was already slightly bright. He reckoned that another day had passed and he still had to rush back to farm. There were still a few days before the start of the month, and the spirit stones for the deficient flame mystic fruit couldn't be cut off. It seemed like he had to use his capital to pay for a few more days. Forget it. Even if it was less, there would still be 36 million spirit stones in a year. After deducting the amount that was used up, he could still earn around 30 million spirit stones. He could only comfort himself like this. He stood up listlessly and waved his hand. That will be all. I still have something to do and have to rush back. He was in a low mood, but he didn't think about it. How many sects could earn 30 million spirit stones in a year even in the human world? He should be content with what he had. However, he was used to seeing a lot of money and he couldn't lift his spirits with less money. Mr. Lady Mu walked over and bowed. I just received a message. A few demon kings and ghost king in the nearby territories heard that Mr. is here and are rushing over at top speed. They wish to pay their respects to Mr. Some of the territories even prepared a greeting gift for Mr. Would Mr. like to wait a little longer? Yu Qianzhou took a glance at her and thought, damn it. She was so poor that she couldn't even afford spirit stones. How could she possibly have a greeting gift? What else could the demon domain have besides spirit herbs? When he thought of spirit herbs, he was slightly taken aback. He reached for the Pill Grandmaster's Pill Recipe Jade Archive and took out a blank Jade Archive. He spent some time copying the spirit herbs that he didn't have on the Jade Archive and handed it to Lady Mu. There are some drawings of spirit herbs in here. You can make a few copies and pass them to the other demon kings and ghost king. Tell them to help me collect some when they have time. As for the greeting gifts, keep them for me. Give them to me when the opportunity arises. Lady Mu took the Jade Archive and asked in surprise, Mister, do you know alchemy? What's so strange about that? Yu Qianzhou waved his hand weakly. I'll take my leave first. He didn't know that almost no one in the demon domain knew alchemy. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many rare spirit herbs left uncollected in the demon domain. Lady Mu glanced at Yan and bowed. I'm afraid you might run into someone as blind as old Monster Ting. We'll see you off, mister. There's no need. Yu Qianzhou walked out of the hall alone. With his back facing the two women, he waved his hand and said, I'm not in a good mood. If there are any more blind fools, I won't waste my breath on them. I'll kill every one of them I see. Then he unsheathed his long sword and carried him away into the sky. Chapter 304. After returning to Shuntian Island, Yu Qianzhou remembered that he had forgotten to ask where the spirit stones could be obtained at the 1,000-mile lake. There was no need to go back and ask. Although a small silver ball had been secretly placed in Miss Mu's village, with Bai Chongqun around, he did not dare to play the trick of suddenly disappearing and reappearing, so he could only wait until that day. In the following days, in addition to taking care of the deficient flame profound fruit, Yu Qianqiu also paid his respects to Bai Changchun every morning and evening. The old man sat there cross-legged without even opening his eyes. He only let out a soft indicating that he understood. In fact, Bai Changchun did not restrict his freedom at all. As long as he served the deficient flame profound fruit well, he could play however he wanted and go wherever he wanted. However, he still did not dare to leave the demon domain. After all, he had not agreed to leave the demon domain. The surrounding houses where Healy used to live now belonged to him, so he often wandered by Changchun's door, looking for an opportunity to strike up a conversation. However, Bai Changchun was like an old monk in meditation sitting there without moving. Yu Qianqiu was anxious. Since he had already taken him as his master, he had to get some real things out of the old man's mouth. For example, the old man's cultivation method was what he coveted the most. Just think, more than 2,000 years ago, when the old man had not yet reached the soul formation stage, none of the top masters in the cultivation world could exchange more than 3 moves with him. Furthermore, he had the ability to split a mountain with his sword. Any one of them would be enough for him to show off. Taking a step back, he could also give one of the spiritual treasures of the 4 families that he had seen last time. However, Bai Changchun had been sitting there, and he did not dare to disturb him except for the excuse of paying his respects. At the beginning of the month, he once again went to Lady Mu's mountain stronghold with his sword. When she found out that he came because he didn't know the location of the Spirit Stones collection, Lady Mu told him the location with a strange expression on her face. Then she helped him bathe together. He lay in the bath and made a decision. He asked Lady Mu to pass on the message that the place to collect Spirit Stones would be changed to this mountain stronghold. Miss Mu was naturally happy about this. It was definitely a good thing to be in contact with the disciples of the punishment enforcer. While putting on his clothes, Yu Qianqiu asked, "Didn't you say last time that someone was going to give me a gift? Have you delivered it yet?" Miss Mu, who was naked but was helping him put on his clothes, smiled and said, "They said there's no need to trouble me. When I see you, I'll give it to you personally." "Are they afraid that you'll keep their things?" Yu Qianqiu asked. "That's not it. Even if they wanted me to stop them, they would know that I wouldn't dare to do so." "He probably wants to meet you and express his sincerity," Lady Mu said with a smile. "Problem." Yu Qianqiu snorted. He could guess what those demons and ghosts were thinking. They just wanted to get acquainted with the disciplinary envoy's disciple. After thinking about it, he decided to satisfy them, so he said, "Miss Mu, send a message to those who want to see me. Tell them to wait for me here at the beginning of next month." Lady Mu, who was dressing herself, smiled and said, "With your words, my place will be lively. I reckon that the 300 demon kings and the 300 ghost king will all rush here." As he spoke, he suddenly frowned and said, "Mister, won't this cause too much of a commotion? What if the torture enforcer is unhappy? Damn it. It's better if he's unhappy. I can't even find a chance to talk to him. It's best if he can find me." Yu Qianqiu's eyes flickered and he waved his hand and said, "It's fine. If there's anything, just push it to me. Just say that I was the one who called for them." Speaking of all the demon kings and ghost king coming here, Yu Qianqiu thought of Yuji, who was good at playing tricks. He didn't know if she would still come after her husband died. She probably would. Understood. Lady Mu looked at him meaningfully. If it was the Li He of the past, he would definitely be very careful and would never dare to say something like this. Lady Mu had already sent someone to fetch the spirit stones that Yu Qianqiu wanted from the 1,000 Miles Lake. Yu Qianqiu tossed the spirit stones into his storage pouch and rushed back to Obedient Island. He found that Bai Changchun was still sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed, meditating. He didn't know how long Bai Changchun was going to sit there. After wandering around for a few days, Miao Yi grew impatient, so he gave up on the idea of wandering around Miao Yi's doorstep. He took out a jade archive and ran to the edge of the island to study it. Recorded on it were the orbits of the star atlas of the 4 directions. Since he had nothing better to do and it wasn't like he could steal it, he might as well see if he could come up with something similar to the star flame fire technique. In the past, he had guessed that the star atlas contained 5 types of elemental magic arts, but he was still groping for the right direction, so he didn't know if it was possible. Bai Changchun didn't even need to open his eyes to know that Yu Qianqiu had been wandering around during this period of time. With his level of cultivation, not even an ant crawling on the island could hide from him. Miao Yi was also curious about Yu Qianzhou's actions. During the day, this kid would wander around blindly after finishing his work. When he had nothing to do, he would catch a few fish and roast them. Occasionally, he would catch some birds and beasts to roast, and would even ask if Miao Yi wanted to eat them. Miao Yi didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so Miao Yi decided to ignore him. Furthermore, the wine in his storage pouch seemed to be inexhaustible, and he used it as water to quench his thirst. At night, as soon as the sky turned dark, Miao Yi would cover his head and sleep soundly, snoring loudly until dawn. Once he got up, he would run to the edge of the lake and make some strange movements with his buttocks in the air. Then he would strip naked and dive into the water to swim. He would catch a fish for breakfast, and when he was full, he would go to work in the garden of the deficient flame profound fruit. Just like this, Miao Yi had never seen him cultivate. If everyone was like him, then there would be no need for him to cultivate. Miao Yi really didn't know how he was able to reach the late core formation stage at such a young age. Actually, Bai Changchun didn't know that Yu Qianzhou himself didn't want to be idle like this. The key was that ever since he absorbed the azure fire, the core in his dantian seemed to have a spiritual nature, and could refine spiritual qi to cultivate. If he were to sit down and painstakingly cultivate, it would be faster to let nature take its course. In fact, he only needed to take out a spirit stone from time to time and absorb spiritual qi. Since it was already like this, was there still a need for him to sit there and cultivate? In addition, he didn't dare to steal it, so he naturally had nothing better to do. Therefore, in the morning he would do calisthenics, swim and make some snacks. Otherwise, Big Brother would be lonely. Which star chart of the 4 directions should he study first? Yu Qianzhou sat by the lake, shaking his head as he pondered. His gaze fell upon the surface of the lake and he paused for a moment. In his previous life, the 5 elements of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth were located in the north. If his guess was correct, the northern star chart should be related to water. With such a large lake here, it was just the right time to verify his conjecture. Out of boredom, he immediately found a way to pass the time. He immersed his divine sense into the northern star chart recorded in the Jade Archive, and calmed his body and mind as he studied the changing trajectories of the star chart. As he sat there, he lost track of time. The moon rose, the moon set, and the stars sank. In the blink of an eye, it was dawn of the next day, yet he was still sitting there in the same position. Usually he would work in the morning, but even when the sun was high in the sky, he was still sitting there with his eyes closed, deep in thought. He had already entered a certain state. This strange phenomenon immediately attracted Bai Changchun's attention. Sitting cross-legged in the room, Bai Changchun finally opened his eyes, revealing an expression of disbelief. He abruptly disappeared from where he was, and soundlessly reappeared in front of Yu Qianzhou. His eyes shone brightly as he sized him up. With his eyes closed, Yu Qianzhou's expression kept changing. Sometimes he would smile foolishly like a child, sometimes he would furrow his brows in deep thought, and sometimes his brows would relax and he would nod slightly as if he had understood something. Bai Changchun's expression was extremely shocked. He had cultivated for more than 2,000 years and his knowledge was vast. The Yu Qianzhou in front of him had obviously comprehended something and entered a state of enlightenment. For cultivators, this was definitely something that could only be encountered by chance. Once they comprehended it, they would benefit for the rest of their lives. Normally, cultivators with low comprehension would find it very difficult to enter this state. Usually, only cultivators with extremely high talent would be able to enter this state. For example, he himself was considered one of the most talented cultivators in the same generation. When he broke through to the soul formation stage at the age of 300, he entered a state of enlightenment. After another 300 years, he broke through to the middle stage from the early stage of soul formation, and after another 500 years, this state of enlightenment appeared again, helping him break through to the late stage of soul formation. However, after reaching the late stage of soul formation, after more than 1,000 years, this state of enlightenment that he yearned for never appeared again. As his lifespan was nearing its end, he had no choice but to search for external methods. He wanted to take the risk of entering the Eastern Holy Land to find a method to break through and ascend. He broke through to the soul formation stage at the age of 300, and reached the middle stage at the age of 600. In total, it took him 1,100 years to reach the late stage of soul formation. Among his peers, his talent was definitely at the top of the best. At the same time, he understood that this was inseparable from his bitter cultivation. However, this young man in front of him, who was always fooling around and idling around, had actually entered a state of enlightenment. His talent was already considered high, but he only had this opportunity when he was 300 years old. But how old was this kid? Was it talent or the will of the heavens? How was this possible? He had never heard of it before. Bai Changchun shook his head and smiled bitterly. His gaze fell on the jade archive in Yu Qianzhou's hand. He thought to himself, could it be that there's something strange about this jade archive? He raised his hand, wanting to take it for a closer look. However, just as he raised his hand, he put it down again and shook his head slightly. If it had nothing to do with this jade archive, he would definitely wake Yu Qianzhou up from this state of enlightenment if he took the jade archive. He might even ruin the one and only opportunity in his life. It was difficult to seek for oneself, but it was also impossible to destroy others. This was the will of the heavens. This was the will of the heavens. He could not go against the will of the heavens. Bai Changchun raised his head to look at the horizon and sighed softly. He thought of the phrase he often said, if the heavens have feelings. However, it had been a long time since the heavens' favor had descended upon him. Now it had descended upon the disciple he had accepted. Fate, was this the will of the heavens? Chapter 305. Bai Changchun's gaze paused on the blazing sun. Only then did he remember that this kid was in a meditative state and he didn't know when he would wake up. He probably wouldn't think of the deficient flame profound fruit for a while. Seemed like he could only do it for him. After idling around for so long, it was rare for him to have this kind of luck after calming down. Bai Changchun glanced at Yu Qianzhou and shook his head with a wry smile. His figure flashed and appeared in the garden where the deficient flame profound fruit was planted. He took out some spirit stones from his storage bag. Yu Qianzhou didn't know that his current state was something that could only be found by chance. Even Bai Changchun was envious of this state. For him, as long as he was willing to calm down, this state should appear at any time. It was the same when he comprehended the star flame fire technique last time. In fact, as Bai Changchun thought, there might be some heaven's will involved, or it could be luck. Bai Suzhen and Yu Qianzhou didn't know the name of the golden bead. If Bai Changchun knew about its mysterious effects, he would be able to tell its origin. This thing was the star bead that caused the ancient Cultivation World War. In fact, it wasn't just the Cultivation World. As the punishment envoy of the demon ghost domain, Bai Changchun also knew other unknown secrets. In the ancient Cultivation World War, even many experts from the Immortal world risked being punished by the Immortals. They braved the danger of never being reincarnated to come to the human world to fight over this star bead. At that time, this world was a world where humans, demons, and ghosts coexisted. The three creatures abided by their rules and generally wouldn't openly offend each other. They each cultivated their own way. When the time came, you became your immortal and I became my immortal. In the end, a group of strong people turned the world upside down for this bead. The rules that humans, demons, and ghosts abided by became **T. In short, the duel between the higher-ups implicated the lower-ups. The lower-ups didn't know what the higher-ups were doing, but they also followed and caused chaos in the world. Demons and ghosts ran amok everywhere, and the human bodies that didn't cultivate suffered. It was at this time that an amazing person appeared and tricked a group of people who liked to fight to a desolate continent in the east. He set up some heaven and earth great array, and trapped the group of troublemaking hooligans. That place was now the **T Eastern Holy Land. However, because of this, the powerful man was severely injured by a group of hooligans. Before he died, the powerful man once again showed his power and forced most of the demons and ghosts to another barren land. Because he was about to die, he did not have the ability to cast a formation again, so he used his spiritual treasure to casually play around. When there was no tiger in the mountain, the monkey would act as the king. The awesome man chose the remaining expert who was about the same level as him to be the torturer, meaning that if there was a ghost or a demon that was disobedient, he would punish him. This was the origin of the domain of demons and ghosts, so Bai Changchun, as a torture envoy, knew that the golden pearl was called the star pearl. The misty universe existed eternally. The primordial bead was bestowed by the primordial chaos. There was a legend passed down from generation to generation among the torturers of the domain of demons and ghosts. It was said that those who could obtain and control the star pearl could become a god who dominated a region. In other words, it was an existence that was more advanced than immortals. It was the kind of existence that no one could restrain except for the primordial chaos. Therefore, such an awesome thing naturally made the experts in the immortal world unable to restrain themselves. So they ran to the human world to play hooligans. Unfortunately, a large group of people was defeated by an awesome person. If Xianxia knew that he had such a thing in his hands, he would definitely go crazy with joy. Fortunately, he did not know. However, he was not a fool. Even if he did not know, he would have regarded the golden pearl as his family treasure. Except for Bai Suzhen, who already knew, it would be difficult for others to ask him even if they beat him to death. He could feel the benefits of the golden pearl more and more, so he decided to keep it to himself until he was old. In this way, it also explained why Xianxia could enter the state that even Bai Changchun envied so easily. Originally, with the star pearl in his body, comprehending the orbit of the stars, compared to others, was like looking for something in his own home. It was much easier than others. Xianxia, whose consciousness was immersed in the Jade Archive, didn't know how much time had passed. His mind was filled with the changing orbit of the stars. In order to transform it into a cultivation technique, he racked his brains. Because he had the experience of comprehending the star flame fire technique by chance, the orbit of the countless stars in the constellation diagram was slowly merging and straightening out. Bai Changchun had just finished replenishing the spirit stones for the star flame profound fruit. His eyes suddenly flashed and he teleported to Xianxia's side. He saw that Xianxia, who was originally sitting casually, had already sat cross-legged in a well-behaved manner. His face had a gratified smile and an expression of understanding. He had comprehended it. It had only been a little more than a day. Bai Changchun was an experienced person. He could tell at a glance. His expression twitched a little, and at the same time he could tell that Xianxia was still in a state that had yet to awaken. Everything he was doing now was like a dream. Bai Changchun's gaze fell on the jade archive that had fallen to the ground. He raised his hand and sucked it into his palm. He imbued his consciousness to examine it, and found that it was filled with a mess of densely packed dots of light. Who knew what they were? However, Bai Changchun's intuition told him that Xianxia's entry into the realm might have something to do with this item. Thus he patiently examined it, hoping to discover something. One was sitting, the other was standing. Unknowingly, another day had passed like this. The sky brightened once again. Bai Changchun slowly opened his eyes and shook his head with a bitter smile. He had pried into someone else's privacy without their permission. Based on his own status, he shouldn't have done so, even though this person was his disciple. Unfortunately, even though he was thick-skinned enough to do so, he still couldn't see through it. There were countless dots of light inside and he really couldn't figure out what they were. Actually, it wasn't just him. Even if the gods were here, they wouldn't be able to understand what they were. These were the markings of the stars that Xianxia had memorized in a hurry. To be more precise, it should be the markings of the 5 directions constellations, with the southern one missing. It was an incomplete item to begin with, and Xianxia had made it for Bai Changchun to see. It was like a person's handwriting. If the handwriting was too sloppy, it would be difficult for others to understand it. Only the person who wrote it would be able to understand it. Even the gods wouldn't be able to understand such an unfathomable thing recorded in the Jade Archive, let alone Bai Changchun, even though he had a profound cultivation base. Regretfully, Bai Changchun quietly placed the Jade Archive back in its original spot. He had done something shameful and thought to himself, "I'll make it up to you in the future." Just as he was about to leave, he suddenly sensed something amiss with his spiritual sense. He looked around but couldn't find anything. He immediately released his divine sense to investigate. He saw that the surface of the lake that Xianxia was facing was densely packed with tiny crystalline dots that were hard to see with the naked eye. Those dots of light were like happy little fairies, circling around Xianxia's body and jumping around cheerfully. Finally, they burrowed into Xianxia's pores. What are these things? Could it be that an external evil has invaded his body? Bai Changchun was shocked. He still had many questions for this disciple of his, and he couldn't afford for anything to happen to him at this moment. He immediately raised his hand with a solemn expression, intending to use his profound cultivation base to chase these tiny, unknown things away. However, in the end he didn't make a move. He was stopped by the comfortable expression on Yu Qianqiu's face. An external evil invading one's body should be painful, not comfortable. With his rich experience, Bai Chongqun didn't make a rash decision. Instead, he carefully stood guard for Yu Qianqiu. If he found anything amiss, he would immediately lend a helping hand. Standing next to Yu Qianqiu, he could feel the air getting more and more humid. It was so humid that he could squeeze water out of it. A faintly discernible, illusory and transparent substance began to wrap around Yu Qianqiu, until it turned into a watery liquid, clear and transparent. Bai Chongqun heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that he had been overthinking things. This kid seemed to have cultivated some kind of mysterious technique. Looking at the blazing sun in the sky, Bai Chongqun smiled bitterly once more. He teleported to the deficient flame profound fruits garden. Chapter 306. Water Elements. The little elves happily flowed into his meridians. A smile appeared on Yu Qianqiu's face. It seemed like his guess about the 5 directions star map was right. There were indeed 5 elemental spells of metal, wood, water, fire and earth. After mastering the spell, Yu Qianqiu didn't have any misgivings and placed the water elements into the cultivation center, the Dantian. Once the little fellows entered the Dantian, they were immediately attracted to the core formation like the fire elements. They all surged towards the core formation one after another and for some unknown reason. When the water element no longer entered his dantian and began to surge toward his limbs and bones, Yu Qianqiu's body trembled. It was as if he was extremely thirsty and suddenly drank cool spring water. He was so comfortable that he let out a moan. Then he quickly began to circulate the water art. Bai Chongqun, who was standing not far away, watched the strange scene in front of him. He saw that Yu Qianqiu was surrounded by a huge transparent ball of water. His whole body had left the ground and was floating in the middle of the ball of water. Just when Yu Qianqiu let out a moan, countless tiny shiny objects that were hard to see with the naked eye rose from the 1,000-mile lake and rushed towards him. The ball of water with a diameter of about 2 meters began to expand. When the ball of water expanded to about 10 meters in diameter, it stopped. Bai Chongqun's expression was serious. This was already the 10th day since Yu Qianqiu entered the qi refining realm. The longer he stayed in the qi refining realm, the more benefits he would get. Every time he entered the qi refining realm, he would stay in the qi refining realm for 10 days at most. If Yu Qianqiu could stay in the qi refining realm for more than 10 days, then without a doubt Yu Qianqiu's talent was higher than his. People who had reached his level of cultivation all knew that the length of time one stayed in the qi refining realm was related to the time one stayed in the qi refining realm. Usually, the longer one stayed in the qi refining realm, the longer one stayed in the qi refining realm. Otherwise, the shorter the time one stayed in the qi refining realm. This was talent. When the water element was injected into every cell in his body, Yu Qianqiu was initially worried that water and fire would not be compatible because his body stored the fire element of the green fire. Who knew that once the water element entered his body, the fire element in every cell would start to compress and automatically give up half of the space. Water and fire would coexist in a line and would not interfere with each other. Just as he was about to call it a day, the core in his dantian suddenly began to move. From the initial slow rotation, it gradually turned into a rapid rotation. The true essence in his dantian was crazily absorbed. The true essence in his dantian was sucked dry, and it began to spread to the true essence outside his dantian. His dantian was like a sewer and all the true essence in his body was sucked in. There was only one reason, and that was to support the absorption of the core. Faster Xikemi. How could this be? Yu Qianqiu panicked a little. He had never heard of such a thing. If this continued, he would be sucked dry. He quickly grabbed a handful of spirit stones with both hands and absorbed the spiritual energy into his body. Bai Chongqun naturally noticed Huang Xiaolong's abnormality. Huang Xiaolong was still in the process of advancing, but he could still take out spirit stones to absorb spiritual energy. Strange. But at this moment Yu Qianqiu was not feeling strange but afraid. The true essence in his body was almost sucked dry, and the core did not even let go of the spiritual energy in his dantian, crazily rotating and absorbing it. 2 more handfuls of spirit stones, not enough. Then 2 more handfuls, still not enough. Huang Xiaolong grabbed handfuls of spirit stones, crazily absorbing the spiritual energy into his body. Unfortunately, the core was like a bottomless pit, not rejecting anything. Whether it was true essence or spiritual energy, as long as it was to its liking, it would absorb it all. Faster thief. Yu Qianqiu wished he could take out the black divine grade spirit stone and absorb it, but his mind was still clear. They were still on the obedient island. Who knew what kind of consequences it would bring if he took out such a heaven-defying treasure? Bai Changchun's eyes shone brightly as he stared at Yu Qianqiu. The speed at which he was absorbing spiritual energy was getting faster and faster. In the end, Bai Changchun was able to grab a handful of spirit stones in each hand, like a whale drinking water. 2 handfuls of spirit stones were sucked dry in the blink of an eye, then tossed away. Another 2 handfuls, more and more spirit stones appeared in Bai Changchun's hands, to the point that they were about to fall off. 10,000 high-grade spirit stones, 20,000, 30,000, 100,000, 200,000. Bai Changchun was dumbfounded. How could someone absorb spirit stones at such a crazy speed? Even with his cultivation, he could only absorb 10,000 high-grade spirit stones at a time, then slowly refine them. It was impossible for him to absorb spirit stones endlessly. How could his body store so much spiritual energy without refining it? Not to mention, he no longer needed to absorb spirit stones to increase his cultivation. Crazy. 2 handfuls of over 100 high-grade spirit stones were sucked dry in 2 seconds. In 1 minute he had absorbed over 3,000 high-grade spirit stones. In 2 hours that was close to 200,000 high-grade spirit stones. Bai Changchun was so shocked that he nearly forgot to replenish the deficient flame profound fruit. 2 days later, Yu Qianqiu finally stopped, panting heavily. In fact, Bai Changchun was more exhausted than Yu Qianqiu. In 2 days, Bai Changchun estimated that he had absorbed more than 10 million high-grade spirit stones in one go. It was truly shocking and unbelievable. Fortunately, Yu Qianqiu was floating in the air, and below him was the foot of the obedient island that extended all the way to the 1,000 Miles Lake. Otherwise, he would have been drowned by the spirit stones. Damn it! It finally stopped. What the hell is this? Making this daddy so nervous, this daddy almost died of exhaustion. Yu Qianqiu's little heart was thumping wildly. The haunted core in his dantian finally stopped. At this time, the core had already turned golden. From its high-speed rotation, it gradually slowed down until it finally stopped. However, Yu Qianqiu felt as if there was another him inside, ready to break out of the shell. Could it be that he was going to break through to the nascent soul stage? That's not right. How could it be so fast? Also, he had never heard of anyone absorbing so many spirit stones to break through to the nascent soul stage. Yu Qianqiu was a little confused. He did not even calculate how many spirit stones he had absorbed. Suddenly, there was a movement in his dantian, which immediately attracted his attention. A crack slowly appeared on the golden core suspended in his dantian. As time passed, the crack became bigger and bigger. After a long time, the golden core finally cracked open. A few pieces of the golden shell fell off and turned into a golden mist. In an instant, the entire dantian was filled with golden mist. Within the golden mist, a baby with complete facial features and 4 limbs could be faintly seen. As the mist floated, the baby's eyes were tightly closed. He was quietly floating in the dantian with his legs crossed. Suddenly, the baby's delicate nose slightly moved. With a fierce breath, the golden mist that was floating in the surroundings was immediately sucked into the baby's body. He broke through. He really broke through to the nascent soul stage. Damn it! Yu Qianqiu could not say whether he was happy or not. He could only forcefully control his emotions. He carefully looked at the baby. He could clearly see that the baby's facial features were somewhat similar to his own. The baby had small arms and legs and was strong and lovable. Suddenly, the baby sneezed fiercely and 2 shiny little balls came out of his nostrils. One was red and the other was black. What the hell is this? He had never heard of such a thing when breaking through to the nascent soul stage. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He released his divine sense to touch it. After a little sensing, he immediately understood what was going on. The red one was actually a fire elemental crystal, and the black one was a water elemental crystal. At this moment, the baby who was sitting cross-legged in meditation yawned again. He saw that the spiritual energy in his dantian had been sucked into it. After a long time he breathed out. However, when he breathed out the spiritual energy, it had already turned into a tiny wisp of true essence. Just like that, the little guy began his first breath. The spiritual energy was inhaled and the true essence was exhaled. And just as he began to breathe, the red fire elemental crystal and the black water elemental crystal, one on the left and one on the right, began to slowly revolve around him. Chapter 307. What's going on? Xianxia was taken aback once again. He saw the golden bead, which had been circulating freely in his dantian, fly to the top of the nascent soul's head and stop. It only stopped for a moment before the golden bead slowly descended and touched the top of the nascent soul's head. In an instant, the golden bead emitted a brilliant light that illuminated his entire dantian. It pierced Xianxia's divine sense, causing him to feel a faint pain. He couldn't see anything, so he hurriedly retracted his divine sense and didn't dare to look anymore. It didn't matter if he couldn't see the movements in his dantian, but he felt that he couldn't move at all. It was as if something was slowly entering his brain. He wanted to circulate his energy to resist, but unfortunately his body was stiff. He could only accept the invasion of that thing. After a long while he felt that the thing had completed its fusion with his brain. Once the fusion was successful, he immediately felt that he could move. He quickly sent his divine sense into his dantian and saw that the golden bead had disappeared. Where did it go? Where did my golden bead go? Xianxia scanned his body with his divine sense. He was really anxious. Without the golden bead, how was he going to return to Utopia? By Suzhen, his parents, his family, Chu Pinger and his army. No matter how his divine sense rumbled in his body, he couldn't find the mysterious golden bead. That's not right. When the golden bead was pressed on the nascent soul's head, he felt that something had fused with his brain. Could it be in the nascent soul's head? He kept thinking about the people in Utopia. The moment his divine sense touched the nascent soul's body, the scene in Utopia immediately appeared in front of him. His divine sense swept across Utopia to investigate. After confirming that he could still communicate with Utopia through the nascent soul, Xianxia finally heaved a sigh of relief. It didn't matter if the golden bead was around. As long as he could return to Utopia, it was likely that the golden bead had fused with the nascent soul. Everything that happened in his dantian was too incredible. Once he successfully cultivated the water spell, the movement in his dantian was simply earth-shattering. He really couldn't figure it out and couldn't understand it. It involved a rather profound truth of the Great Tao. He happened to practice the incantation of water and fire by chance, which implied the number of yin and yang. Together with the mysterious effect of the star bead, it immediately changed the core. It absorbed the spiritual aura crazily to complete its own evolution. As a result, the core took shape in advance, and Xianxia also broke through to the nascent soul stage in advance. What made Xianxia ecstatic was that his nascent soul was actually refining the spiritual qi and transforming it into true essence. Just like before, he didn't need to sit there and cultivate like an idiot. In fact, cultivation was really a boring thing. Once he got rid of the sea of suffering, he could free up time to do other things. The water ball enveloping him slowly retracted into his body, and he also sat on the ground. Xianxia, whose face was filled with joy, finally opened his eyes. He had successfully cultivated the water spell and had broken through to the original infant stage. How could he not be happy? The night sky was bright with stars, and it was an enchanting night. Xianxia gazed at the enchanting starry sky, and the smile on his face gradually stiffened. F***ck. He suddenly let out a strange cry. He really didn't know how long he had been sitting there. What time was it now, and Bai Changchun had given him the task of taking care of the deficient flame profound fruit. He immediately jumped up high and turned around, wanting to run towards the deficient flame profound fruit's garden. However, he saw Bai Changchun standing behind him, looking at him with sparkling eyes. Xianxia came to a sudden stop and awkwardly bowed. "Master. You've broken through to the early nascent soul stage?" Bai Changchun asked, sizing him up. Xianxia respectfully replied, "Yes, master." The jade archive was still on the ground. Bai Changchun raised his hand and took it. "Is the incantation you're practicing related to the things inside?" "Yes, master." Xianxia thought to himself, "The things I've figured out are nothing in your eyes, so it doesn't matter if I tell you." "What's so profound about this? Why can't even I understand it?" Bai Changchun asked. "Inside are the coordinates of the stars in the sky. The incantation this disciple created was precisely based on the stars in the sky. Speaking of which, it's also because of Master. Otherwise, this disciple wouldn't have thought of this. You're saying that the incantation you created is related to me? Bai Changchun revealed a doubtful expression. Yu Qianzhou smiled sheepishly. Master, you may not know this, but this disciple has a good relationship with the 4 great clans of the cultivation world. Once at the Wu clan's ancestral hall, I offered incense to Master. They all thought that Master had already passed away. To show my respect, this disciple also offered incense in front of Master's portrait. In the end, I heard the Wu clan talk about Master's past, saying that all of your incantation arts were comprehended from the way of heaven. I saw in the portrait that Master was looking up at the starry sky, so this disciple boldly guessed that the way of heaven that Master comprehended had something to do with the stars in the sky. As a result, this disciple often learned to look up at the stars, and in the end accidentally comprehended some incantation arts and casually used it. Bai Changchun looked at Miao Yi with a rare look of astonishment. Then he sent his divine sense into the jade archive to examine it, then looked at the starry sky. Indeed, he found some similarities. He thought to himself, I haven't even taken him as my disciple, but because of one of my portraits, we're already destined to be master and disciple. It seems that taking him as my disciple is indeed the will of the heavens. He was worried that after he left, the demon domain would wreak havoc in the mortal realm. Who would have thought that the heavens would have their own plans? Bai Changchun was overwhelmed with emotions. He took a few light steps forward and stood by the lake. He placed the hand holding the jade archive behind his back and gazed at the starry sky, remaining silent for a long time. Yu Qianzhou saw that Miao Yi seemed to be deep in thought, so he didn't dare to disturb him. Thus he obediently stood behind Miao Yi and accompanied him. In the end, Miao Yi stood there until dawn. It was only when the sky was enveloped by the morning glow that Bai Changchun turned around and handed the jade archive back to Yu Qianzhou. He said, This is your destiny. Even I can't pry into it. You must cultivate well and be kind to your destiny. After saying this, he slowly walked away by himself. Holding the jade archive in his hands, Yu Qianzhou was stunned. I've waited so long to talk to you. How can I let you off so easily? He couldn't help but call out, Master. Hearing this, Bai Changchun turned around and asked, Is something the matter? Yu Qianzhou ran over eagerly. After dawdling for a while, he was a little embarrassed to speak. If you have something to say, say it, Bai Changchun said. That. Yu Qianzhou gritted his teeth and said, This disciple's cultivation is still shallow. Can Master teach me a few powerful techniques so that I can protect myself? He was filled with admiration for Bai Changchun's amazing feats. It would be wonderful if he could learn a few powerful techniques. When the time came, he could defeat all the experts from the various sects in the cultivation world within 3 moves. Moreover, he had to do it openly. Then his name would definitely shake the world and he would become the strongest leader in the cultivation world. Haven't you already figured out a suitable technique for yourself? Why do you still want to learn from me? Bai Changchun asked. Damn it. If I don't want to learn from you, why did you take me in as your disciple? Yu Qianzhou bowed and said, This little trick of mine is nothing in front of Master. How can it compare to Master's profound techniques? This disciple truly wishes to learn them. Little trick. Is this supreme and holy technique that can borrow the power of the origin of heaven and earth a little trick? Bai Changchun retorted. He looked at him seriously and said, Yu Qian, listen carefully. From what I can see, the technique you've figured out is the true holy technique of the Great Path. It's much stronger than what I've figured out. I can't wait to be envious. Why do you want to neglect the essentials? Chapter 308. Origin of Heaven and Earth. Holy and Supreme? Is it that powerful? Yu Qianzhou's tone was a little doubtful. Bai Changchun nodded. You don't have to doubt this. I can tell from your ability to control fire and water that it's not because your cultivation level is high enough to control them, but because the technique you practice allows you to easily use the origin of fire and water. The fire and water are you and you are the fire and water. The origin of fire and water have already become one with you and you can summon them at will. It's so mysterious that it allows you to use it as you please. How can it not be powerful? Although what he said was reasonable, Yu Qianzhou's level was still too far away from what he knew. He didn't care whether it was one or not, or whether it was mysterious or not. To put it bluntly, he still didn't understand how powerful it was. Yu Qianzhou frowned, his face full of confusion. You still don't understand? Bai Chongqun saw it too. Yu Qianzhou shook his head and answered honestly, I am ignorant, I don't understand. Bai Chongqun paused and asked, how is Heli's cultivation compared to yours? Not as good as Heli. When I fought him before, he was already in the middle stage of the passing calamity stage. I was only in the late stage of the core formation stage. I was 5 stages lower than him. You were able to kill someone in the middle stage of the passing calamity stage when you were in the late stage of the core formation stage. Can't you see how powerful your technique is? At the very least, when I was in the late stage of the core formation stage, I couldn't kill someone in the late stage of the passing calamity stage. Master, this is different. Healy didn't die to my technique but to Qinghuo's tyranny. If it wasn't for this disciple's plan, no matter how powerful Qinghuo was, he wouldn't have been able to touch him, let alone kill him. Yu Qianzhou smiled bitterly. He was aware of his own limitations. What's the difference? In the end, Heli still lost to your fire technique. It really is different. Master, Heli didn't react in time. By the time he reacted, it was already too late. If Healy's cultivation had already reached the final stage of crossing tribulation, he would have been able to use teleportation to escape once he realized that something was amiss. I wouldn't have been able to hurt him, let alone kill him. At that time I would have been killed. Truly a piece of rotten wood guarding a treasure mountain without knowing how to use it. Bai Chongqun sighed and said, in this world, no matter how powerful the incantation is, no matter who has it, the one who can use it well will be invincible. If one can't use it well, no matter how powerful the incantation is, it's useless. Yu Qianzhou, since you know that it was your own scheme and Qinghuo's tyranny that killed Healy, you should understand that the most powerful magic art is to use it well, not the magic art itself. Damn it! Who didn't know how to talk about principles? No matter how good Laozi was, it was impossible for him to split a mountain in half with one sword strike. Yu Qianzhou thought for a while and said, Disciple has 2 questions that I would like Master to clear up. Speak. Bai Chongqun looked at him with deep meaning in his eyes. He understood that if he didn't explain things clearly today, even if Yu Qianzhou accepted it verbally, he wouldn't be convinced in his heart. Yu Qianzhou bowed and said, First question, if Disciple didn't practice the fire incantation that day when I fought with Healy, but used the water incantation that I had just mastered, how could Disciple defeat him? Second question, Disciple recently saw a stone mountain that had been split in half by someone. I heard that it was split by Master's sword strike. Disciple knows that even if I was good at using it, I wouldn't be able to split such a large stone mountain with one sword strike. To be able to use such a tyrannical sword strike, I'm afraid that Master's cultivation base and the incantation that you practice must have something to do with it. Do you know about Master's cultivation experience? Master might as well tell you about it. A faint smile appeared on Bai Chongqun's face as he stood by the lake with his hands behind his back. He looked at the distant horizon and said in an aged voice, More than 2,000 years ago, I was a young scholar who came to the capital to take the imperial examination. At that time, my greatest desire was to be nominated for the imperial examination and bring honor to my ancestors. However, the affairs of the world are unpredictable. Because I was drenched in the rain before the examination, I fell seriously ill and entered the examination hall with a serious illness. Naturally, I didn't make it to the imperial examination hall. Feeling ashamed, I felt that I couldn't face my hometown elders again, so I had the idea of committing suicide. I stumbled and found a cliff and jumped down. Yu Qianzhou was dumbfounded when he heard this. This torturer, who was famous in the demon ghost region, had committed suicide by jumping off a cliff when he was young? But what did he mean by telling me this? Could it be that he had picked up some secret manual at the foot of the mountain, or met some otherworldly expert or something? As you can see, I'm naturally not dead since I'm standing here. After jumping off the cliff, I was lucky enough to fall into a deep pool. After experiencing life to death and then back to life again, I no longer had the thought of seeking death. However, I was trapped in the cliff and couldn't get out. There was a dead body at the foot of the cliff. I picked up a book beside him and opened it. It was about the method of cultivation. Here it comes, I really picked up a secret manual. I'm going to find a few cliffs to jump off one day. Xianxia's eyes suddenly lit up. At that time I knew nothing about the cultivation world. After reading the contents of the book, I thought it was a wonderful method of immortals and was extremely happy. Later I learned that it was just a manual for beginners in cultivation. At the time I cultivated under the cliff and stayed there for more than 10 years. When I was thirsty I drank from the mountain spring. When I was hungry I ate wild fruits to fill my stomach. Just like that, I managed to cultivate to the 10th rank of qi condensation. That was the end of the contents of the scroll. However, by chance I accidentally ate a spirit fruit. Just like that, I unknowingly broke through to foundation establishment. Hee. Master's really lucky. In order to reach the foundation establishment realm I suffered a lot. Xianxia said with a smile. When I buried the dead body I took his sword. With my foundation establishment realm cultivation, I comprehended the sword kinesis technique and flew out of the cliff. At that time when I saw that I could fly, I thought that I had already learned the wonderful method of immortals and became an immortal. After I came out I secretly returned home. In the end I found that the whole village had been destroyed by the flames of war. Since then I used my foundation establishment realm cultivation to wander around. Later when I met some people in the cultivation world I realized how insignificant I was. I was originally just a foundation establishment realm rogue cultivator without a sect. After the foundation establishment realm, there are even higher realms. Xianxia looked at Bai Changchun with a strange expression. He thought to himself, a little foundation establishment realm cultivator without any ability actually dared to run around. He's really lucky that he didn't get killed. During those years in the cultivation world I did indeed suffer a lot. But I thought those cultivation sects cultivation arts are also created by people. It's not like they're born with it. Why can't I create my own cultivation art? Besides, my sword kinesis technique was originally created by me, so it's not something that's impossible to achieve. With this thought I traveled around the world alone, concentrating on observing the things around me. Master's ambition is indeed not something ordinary people can reach. Xianxia didn't miss the opportunity to flatter him. Unfortunately, the effect was not very good. Bai Changchun didn't even look at him and continued. I watched the sea and clouds, the sunrise and sunset, the movement of the stars, the rise and fall of the sea, the ferocious beasts hunting in the deep mountains, the goshawks hunting rabbits in the grasslands, the thunderbolts in the rainy night, the dragonflies skimming the surface of the water by the pond, the water dripping through the stone under the eaves, the people coming and going in the busy city, the two armies fighting on the battlefield. After so many years I had a lot of enlightenment. Once I understood it, my cultivation advanced by leaps and bounds, and I became who I am today. Hearing that his cultivation advanced by leaps and bounds, Xianxia's eyes lit up. He swallowed his saliva and said, Master, can you teach me the cultivation art you've comprehended? I sincerely want to learn it. You still don't understand what I mean? Bai Changchun turned around and looked at him with his bright eyes. Damn it! Who the hell can understand what you're talking about? Jumping off a cliff, looking at the stars, looking at the pond and watching rabbits? You can't possibly ask me to go and look at them all just because I'm full. I definitely won't be able to tell. Xianxia grumbled in his heart. He said respectfully, I'm really foolish. I've left my cultivation art behind in the 4 great clans. Do you know why none of them could comprehend it? Bai Changchun asked. I don't know. Xianxia answered straightforwardly. He thought to himself, Old man, can't you just explain things clearly? There's a generation gap of more than 2,000 years between us. It's really hard to communicate. I don't even know why you're talking so much nonsense. You're really foolish. Don't you understand? Your master's cultivation art doesn't have any fixed cultivation art. It's based on the Tao of heaven and earth. Everything in the world has its own Tao. I can borrow and use anything that's in common. This is your master's Tao to defeat the enemy. It's also why no one in the 4 great clans could learn it. My Tao relies on comprehension, not learning. Bai Changchun looked at him and sighed. Everything in the world has its own origin. Your master can only borrow it, but you can possess it. The difference between the two is obvious. If you borrow it, you'll be restricted, but if you possess it, you can do as you please. This time Xianxia finally understood a little. He fell into deep thought. Bai Changchun looked at him and shook his head. He turned around and pointed at the lake. He said, "This water looks calm and doesn't have any power. However, as long as you use it well, it can be ever-changing. Its power can reach the heavens. Why can't it defeat the enemy? You've comprehended the water art, but you can't feel it or use its power. This means that you can't use it well. This can be seen from your clumsy technique of controlling fire. Xianxia, watch carefully now. Your master wants to borrow this lake water and display its power. I'll only do it once. Whether you can comprehend it or not depends on yourself." Chapter 309. Holiest *T. A super expert was about to perform. He couldn't miss this opportunity. Xianxia's eyes widened immediately. He had been dragged down from the sky by Changchun twice. Although he had experienced it himself, he had never seen Changchun fight. He had only heard of it from a distant legend. Just as Changchun finished speaking, Xianxia's pupils shrank suddenly. He couldn't see anything else in his eyes. The old figure in front of him seemed to have merged with heaven and earth in an instant. Or rather, heaven and earth had merged with him. Only he could be seen standing there. The whole world seemed to have quietened down. The surrounding air seemed to have solidified. Xianxia felt suffocated. He couldn't even breathe. He was about to be swallowed by that suffocating feeling. His eyes seemed to be covered with a layer of white cloth. Gradually he couldn't see anything. In a moment of desperation he bit the tip of his tongue. A sharp pain woke him up. The salty taste in his mouth told him that he had bitten his tongue. However, he finally woke up from that feeling of sinking to death. His eyes also regained clarity. Oh my God. He hadn't even made a move. With just a thought, the aura he emitted could kill people invisibly. It was no wonder that he could seriously injure a group of crossing tribulation stage experts from Fuxian Island who broke into the demon ghost region with just his divine sense. Xianxia took a deep breath. He looked around and felt his heart palpitate. The rippling lake surface had completely calmed down. It was as clean as a mirror. Although he couldn't see the lake surface far away, at least he could see it. The surrounding flowers and trees swaying in the wind were as still as statues. The gentle breeze had disappeared. The palpitating feeling grew stronger. Xianxia didn't even dare to breathe. He knew that Changchun was about to make a move. The palpitating feeling was a sign that he was about to make a move. He moved. Changchun casually waved his hand, and the surface of the lake beneath his feet rippled, slowly spreading into the distance. At first, nothing special could be seen, but as the ripples pushed out layer by layer, the ripples that rolled into the distance gradually turned into waves. Layer by layer, the waves finally formed into waves that surged into the distance, and the waves piled up higher and higher. Xianxia looked around. He guessed that it wasn't just in front of him. The waves were spreading with Xianxia Island as the center. What was the old thing doing? Xianxia couldn't understand. Looking around, the waves had already rolled for nearly a kilometer, and the height of the waves was probably close to 100 meters. Suddenly, Xianxia's head shook left and right. He looked around and then looked straight ahead. The waves seemed to be blocked by something a kilometer away. It was the same for the places he could see to his left and right. Hua! Standing on the island, one could hear the sound of the waves crashing into each other. One could see the waves crashing into each other. With a reverse roll, the 100-meter-high waves quickly swayed back. Hua! Rumble! The 100-meter-high waves were originally spreading in all directions. Due to the shrinking of the circle, the centripetal force generated was not small. This was like a bucket of water. When you punch it, the water will rush in all directions. But when it hits the wall of the bucket, the water will return to the center point. The 200 to 300 meter high waves came crashing back towards Xianxia Island with a deafening sound. The momentum was even more terrifying than standing in front of a tsunami. At the very least, a tsunami wouldn't be able to create such a high wave. The huge waves rushed over. If one wanted to see the white waves, they would have to raise their heads. Xianxia could feel the Xianxia Island shaking. He looked at Changchun in fear. What was this old man trying to do? If he didn't know that the deficient flame profound fruit was still on the island, Xianxia would have already escaped with his sword. With such a huge wave rushing over, the pressure it produced was more than 10,000 caddies. With his current cultivation, even if he didn't die, he would not be far from it. Just when the wave was less than 100 meters away from Xianxia Island, Bai Chongqun flashed his palms and fiercely pushed against the huge wave. Although Yu Qianzhou didn't know how powerful his palms were, he was still forced back a dozen steps by the aura released from his palms. His blood and qi were in turmoil. Two huge handprints suddenly appeared on the wave wall a few hundred meters in front of them, forcibly stopping the advance of the huge wave. Who knew how much strength was needed to do that? Suddenly, Bai Chongqun swung his arms left and right. When the huge wave was about to reach Xiantian Island, it suddenly received a heavy blow. The wave that was formed instantly collapsed and retreated into the distance. That casual swing of his arms seemed elegant, but it was unknown how much energy was contained in it to be able to repel such a huge wave in an instant. The crisis was resolved just like that. Good heavens! Yu Qianzhou looked at both sides and his heart was thumping hard. This old guy was too awesome. No wonder he was a late-stage deity transformation cultivator. He really had the ability to overturn rivers and seas. As soon as he looked in front of him, Yu Qianzhou was immediately stunned. An ice wall that was nearly 100 meters high was floating on the surface of the water. It was sparkling and translucent under the sunlight, and there were even frozen fish inside. This was clearly the place where Bai Chongqun had blocked the wave with his palms. The two huge handprints were still there. Although it was nearly 100 meters away from Xiantian Island, the dense white cold air had already begun to close in. It had instantly solidified into ice, and it was such a big piece. Yu Qianzhou rubbed his eyes several times in disbelief. After confirming that there was no doubt, he speechlessly looked at Bai Chongqun. He really didn't understand what he meant by doing this. Could it be that he wanted to show off his cultivation? Bai Chongqun turned his head to look at him and said indifferently, "Weak water can also turn into raging waves. Formless can also turn into tangible forms." Then he flicked two fingers at the edge of the lake. With a light flick, a pillar of water jumped out of the lake and circled around the surface of the lake like a dragon. Suddenly, it ferociously attacked Yu Qianzhou. F***ck. Yu Qianzhou cried out in shock. "Master, what are you doing?" Before he could even take a few steps, he was entangled by the water dragon. It coiled around his body, and in an instant he was completely wrapped up. Inside the water dragon, Yu Qianzhou was struggling with his eyes closed. Suddenly, his mouth opened wide and his eyes widened, revealing an expression of disbelief. The water that was wrapped around him also fell to the ground with a hua sound. The moment he was enveloped by the water, Yu Qianzhou felt the water drilling into his 7 orifices. It was fine if the water entered his mouth and nose, but if it entered his eyes and ears, it would be terrible. This was not the same as when water entered his eyes and ears when he was swimming. He would become deaf and blind. Therefore he immediately used his internal energy to resist. Who knew that the despicable water would not let go of his buttocks? His buttocks felt cold and he was immediately shocked. Fortunately, Bai Chongqun was lenient. Otherwise he would be the first man in history to be raped by water. Yu Qianzhou stood there like a drowned rat. A pair of dead fish eyes stared at Bai Chongqun. He bit his lips and held back the word despicable, but he did not dare to say it out loud. Water is invisible, but it can penetrate through any hole. Bai Chongqun said indifferently. He stretched out 2 fingers and flicked at the surface of the lake again. This time 2 water pillars jumped out and turned into 2 swimming dragons. Yu Qianzhou immediately panicked. With an extremely miserable voice, he quickly begged for mercy. "Master, your power is boundless, please spare me." However, the 2 water dragons did not give him any face at all. They quickly pounced on him and circled around him, tearing off his clothes. Then he turned into 2 puddles of water and fell to the ground. Yu Qianzhou was so embarrassed that his face turned green. His hands covered the important parts of his lower body and he was about to go berserk. Fortunately, no one was watching. In the end, he hurriedly took out a set of clothes from the storage bag on the ground and quickly put them on. Water is weak, but it can also be powerful. Bai Chongqun's tone was still calm. He flicked his finger and a water pillar that was much bigger than the previous 2 jumped out of the lake. Yu Qianzhou's eyes immediately widened. He saw that the water pillar had turned into a sharp icicle. Bai Chongqun waved his hand and the icicle made a "hoo" sound. It quickly shot towards the huge floating ice that was almost 100 meters away. With a loud hong sound, the floating ice collapsed into a few pieces and swayed on the surface of the water. When water turns into ice, It can also subdue the enemy. Bai Changchun said indifferently as he looked at the collapsed floating ice. It was not targeted at him. Yu Qianzhou immediately heaved a sigh of relief. Bai Changchun turned around, looked at him and said, "Now, do you still think that the water art is useless? The key is how you use it. I can do this just by borrowing the water. You have the source, so you should be able to display an even greater advantage. Of course, it is a fact that my cultivation is higher than yours, but that is only in terms of power. In terms of using it, you should be better than me." Disciple understands. Disciple will definitely try to figure it out. Yu Qianzhou's expression was full of grievance. He decided in his heart that he would not tell anyone about what happened today, even if he was beaten to death. Also, your method of controlling fire is extremely clumsy. With such a tyrannical green fire, why do you only know how to set it on fire? You can control 100 swords at the same time, so why can't you use fire to control swords? Why don't you put more effort into this? I believe that your power will definitely increase greatly. Bai Changchun taught. Could be said that this was the first time he taught someone like this. In the past, although Healy was also his disciple, he had never enjoyed this kind of treatment. It was clear that he saw Yu Qianzhou in a different light. He still needed to ponder over the previous words, but this sentence immediately sank in. Yu Qianzhou's eyes lit up when he heard this, and he thought to himself, "That's right. Why didn't I think of that? If I changed the sword control to the green fire control, then wouldn't I be killing my enemies everywhere?" The old man was indeed an old man. His foresight was indeed unique. Disciple will remember master's teachings. Yu Qianzhou bowed respectfully. His previous unhappiness immediately disappeared. Bai Changchun nodded and said, "Based on my many years of cultivation experience in this world, there should be more than 2 types of fire and water sources. I estimate that there should be 5 types. You were able to understand 2 types, so you can more or less comprehend things that others don't know. If you have the heart, you can try to understand the other types of sources." Hearing this, Yu Qianzhou was filled with deep respect and immediately bowed deeply. In this world there was no such thing as the 5 elements, but the old man was actually able to understand it. It was really not simple. "Alright, I have said what I need to say. You practice diligently. When the time is right, I will let you go out and do some things for master." Bai Changchun turned around and slowly walked towards the center of the island. As he walked, he did not forget to remind him, "I have already taken care of the deficient flame profound fruit for you for 20 days. If you dare to be lazy again, I will not forgive you." Disciple will not dare again. Yu Qianzhou bowed to send him off. He thought to himself, "These words don't make sense. I am obviously helping you take care of it. How did it become you helping me take care of it?" After he got up, he was stunned again. 20 days had already passed? Adding on the days that he had wasted before, tomorrow would be the beginning of the month. It was the day that he had arranged to meet with the Demon Kings and the Ghost King. Yu Qianzhou looked up at the sun in the sky and walked towards the vegetable garden with a smile on his face. Not only did he successfully cultivate the water arts, he was also able to receive guidance from the old man. This old man with a cultivation level of soul formation final stage was really powerful. With just a casual guidance, he had benefited a lot. However, he did not know what kind of things he wanted him to do. He also did not know if it would be dangerous or not. Chapter 3:10. After replenishing the spirit stones for the deficient flame profound fruit, Yu Qianzhou returned to the lakeside where Bai Changchun had demonstrated and sat down cross-legged. He carefully recalled Bai Changchun's every move. Although the huge ice floe had been smashed into pieces, it still had a considerable volume floating on the surface of the lake. Under the scorching sun, the sparkling and translucent ice gradually melted. Water droplets dripped from the edges and corners of the ice floe, splashing on the surface of the lake. The cracked ice floe swayed not far from the shore. After witnessing Bai Changchun's momentum, which could overturn rivers and seas with a wave of his hand, Yu Qianzhou no longer doubted that he could split a mountain with a single sword strike. However, he couldn't figure out how he could instantly turn water into ice. What's more, it was such a large piece. Bai Changchun said he could do it too. Yu Qianzhou knitted his brows tightly as his gaze fell on the floating ice that was drifting closer and closer. Suddenly, he stood up abruptly and hurriedly took a few steps forward. His feet stomped on the shore and his body shot out gracefully. He somersaulted several times in the air and flew diagonally to the largest floating ice that was more than 20 meters tall and 30 meters away from the shore. Standing on the floating ice floe, Yu Qianqiu turned his head to look at the spot where he had jumped 30 meters away. A smile appeared on his face. Presumably, if he used all his strength to jump, he should be able to cross 50 meters with the help of inertia. With this distance, he would definitely be considered a top-notch Qinggong expert in the secular world. He had never practiced Qinggong in the secular world. Being able to jump so far was naturally related to his cultivation reaching the nascent soul stage. At the very least, when he was at the core formation stage, he wouldn't have been able to jump so far. Remembering that he could already fly after reaching the nascent soul stage, Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. He casually took out a jade archive from his storage pouch. The contents of the archive were all stolen from the cultivation pavilion of Fuxian Island. There was a method to fly after reaching the nascent soul stage. For someone who had already reached the nascent soul stage, this was not a very profound method. It was just a technique to grasp. Yu Qianqiu put away the jade archive and circulated his quintessential essence around his body, controlling his body to maintain a delicate relationship with the air. His feet gradually left the floating ice and he slowly floated up into the air. However, his shaky appearance showed that he was not proficient enough. After tossing and turning for a while, he could barely raise his body to a height of 20 meters in the air. It was even more difficult for him to fly. Moving left and right was no different from crawling. How could it be considered flying? Now he finally understood why most of the nascent soul stage cultivators still couldn't use sword kinesis flight. The key was that their cultivation wasn't high enough. Only when their cultivation was high enough to control their body in the air would they be able to truly fly. If that didn't work, then flying on the sword would be faster than before. Yu Qianqiu struggled to maintain his balance in the air. The long sword on his back shot out with a clang, and a cold light drew a half arc in the air, supporting him steadily. His feet sank, and with a single thought, the flying sword carried him diagonally up into the sky. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a black dot. Not long after, the black dot grew larger. Yu Qianqiu turned sideways, stepping on the sword with his hands behind his back. His clothes and long hair fluttered behind him as he broke through the air, rushing towards the floating ice he had been standing on earlier. Just as they were about to collide, Yu Qianqiu quickly shot up from the flying sword and transformed into a human silhouette, falling towards the lake. The cold light turned and flashed to chase after him, once again supporting him. A human silhouette could be seen darting in and out of the fragmented floating ice, extremely nimble and fast. Finally, he flew in circles around the largest floating ice. Abruptly, Yu Qianqiu shot up again, spreading his arms wide as he landed lightly in the middle of the floating ice. Just as he landed, the flying sword quickly chased after him. With a clang, it returned to its scabbard and quieted down along with him. Awesome. A nascent soul cultivator's flying sword was indeed incomparable to a core formation cultivator's. Yu Qianqiu relaxed and let out a breath. His gaze fell on the huge floating ice and his brows furrowed again. Since he cultivated the water art, controlling water shouldn't be a problem. However, how did he turn water into ice? Yu Qianqiu slowly walked to the edge of the floating ice, his gaze wandering between the floating ice and the lake water. He believed that since Bai Chongqun said he could do it, then he would definitely be able to do it. Yu Qianqiu released his divine sense into the lake water. A sense of intimacy arose spontaneously, as if the lake water was a part of his body. Suddenly, following the teasing of his fingers, streams of clear lake water jumped out of the lake and fell back down, making dong 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 sounds. When his divine sense wandered to the point where the floating ice and the lake water met, his fingers suddenly stopped teasing. At this moment, Bai Chongqun's voice suddenly rang in his ears, reminding him in a timely manner, everything has two sides. When things reach an extreme, they will move in the opposite direction. So stupid. Yu Qianqiu slapped his forehead and suddenly came to a realization. The reason why water could freeze was naturally because of the low temperature. He cultivated the fire art, so controlling temperature was his forte. If he could control it well, he could make the surrounding temperature frighteningly high, and if he absorbed the temperature, he could naturally lower the surrounding temperature. Wasn't this the opposite of things? Thank you for your advice, master. Yu Qianqiu bowed towards the center of the island. With a backhand gesture, he raised his hand towards the surface of the lake. With a xiao sound, a stream of lake water flew over and formed a water ball in his palm. Holding the water ball in his palm, he circulated the fire art, and the temperature in his palm rapidly decreased. In an instant, a dense white gas appeared, and a crystal-clear ice ball was formed in the blink of an eye. And the temperature that was absorbed into his palm was instantly swallowed up by the fire element, becoming a tonic for the green fire element. This bit of temperature was simply too insignificant when integrated into the green fire element. When things reach an extreme, they will move in the opposite direction. So that's how it is, Yu Qianzhou danced excitedly. He casually threw the ice ball and summoned the lake water to test it out. All kinds of ice crystals were formed in his hands. In the end, he became more and more proficient. Raising both of his palms, 10 water pillars emerged from the lake. Both of his hands stretched out 2 fingers and quickly pointed at the 10 water pillars. In the blink of an eye, ice pillars were formed and fell back into the water. Satisfying. Yu Qianzhou let out a hollow cry and suddenly jumped straight towards the surface of the water under the ice flow. The moment his feet touched the surface of the water, white frost immediately appeared on the surface of the water, crackling and spreading in all directions. Not long after, the ice flow within a radius of a few hundred meters was instantly frozen by the ice formed on the surface of the water. Yu Qianzhou cheered excitedly on the layer of ice. It was hard not to be happy about this kind of magic that almost conquered the laws of nature. Just like what Bai Changqun had said, as long as it was used properly, it would definitely have a miraculous effect in future conflicts. As the saying goes, once you understand one thing, all will follow. From this, Yu Qianzhou thought that even if he didn't absorb the fire element in the future, he would probably be able to create fire out of thin air just by absorbing the temperature of the surroundings. Of course, this kind of fire couldn't be compared to a heavenly fire like the blue fire. After his emotions calmed down a little, he suddenly thought of something. Yu Qianzhou felt that it was a little strange. Bai Changqun hadn't cultivated the fire spell before, so how did he turn such a huge wave into ice in an instant? Even he couldn't do it with his current cultivation. Such a huge wave hitting him, not to mention turning him into ice, he was afraid that the huge force generated would be enough to slap him half to death. He thought for a moment and had a guess. Bai Changqun always talked about the heavenly Tao, so his understanding of the natural climate change was definitely not something that others could compare to. He must have used his profound cultivation to instantly create an extreme difference in the temperature and quickly turn the huge wave into ice. If that was really the case, Yu Qianzhou shuddered. He didn't know about other soul formation stage cultivators, but that old man's cultivation was really too terrifying. Because of his previous comprehension, his guess was correct. The method that Bai Changqun used was exactly the same as he thought. But it was also because he knew the reason behind it that he was able to understand even more how terrifying Bai Changqun was. A huge wave that reached the sky turned into ice in the blink of an eye. Yu Qianzhou shook his head and decided not to think about it anymore. The more he thought about it, the more terrified he felt. The more he thought about it, the more insignificant he felt. He raised his palm and with a buzz, a faint blue flame ignited. He looked around at the ice floating around him and thought, I should just listen to the old man's words and try to use the Guiyuan sword technique to control the blue fire. Chapter 311. The 1,000-mile lake in front of Obedient Island was a small world of ice. A few huge ice floes were already connected together by the ice on the surface of the lake. The snow-white lake, the sparkling and translucent ice floes, under the illumination of the sun, the small world was completely different from the surrounding environment. Yu Qianzhou stood on the surface of the frozen lake, standing in the middle of a few huge ice floes. 100 balls of green flame floated around him, and under the illumination of the green flame, the surrounding ice floes also reflected an enchanting green radiance. Damn it! Directly using fire to attack is too slow, and the larger the size, the greater the resistance. Looks like I have to compress the green flame into the shape of a flying sword. Yu Qianzhou frowned as he muttered to himself. His hands quickly formed a series of hand seals, and the 100 balls of green flame slowly lengthened. After many experiments, he finally managed to compress the green flame into the shape of a flying sword. He pointed at one of the ice floes and a green flying sword shot out, silently piercing through the ice floes. Recalling the flying sword, Yu Qianzhou frowned again. Although the problem of speed was solved, the ice flows were not pierced by the flying sword itself. Instead, it was because the flying sword was compressed by the green flame, and the high temperature melted a hole in the ice flows. This was not the result he wanted. Since he was going to make the green flame into a flying sword, he had to make it look like a real flying sword. Otherwise, it would be inconvenient for him to launch a sneak attack. Just think about it, if someone discovered that there was something strange about the sword, they would definitely be on guard. With a series of hand seals, the 99 flying swords shot towards him, and instantly disappeared into his body. Only one flying sword floated in front of him, and he needed to concentrate on studying it. He was currently making adjustments to the fire, and his hand seals were moving like shadows. After a long time, he suddenly pointed 2 fingers at one of the ice flows and lightly shouted, "Go!" A cold azure light flashed and a crisp ding sound rang out. Half of the azure flying sword's body was inserted into the floating ice, and the other half with the hilt was trembling non-stop. Success. Yu Qianzhou looked at the flying sword with a smug smile. Then he spun around on the ice like a spinning top. Swish swish. In the blink of an eye, his body emitted countless green lights. When he stopped, there were already 99 green flying swords revolving around him. Yu Qianzhou raised his hand and hooked 2 of his fingers. Then he pulled out the flying sword that was stuck in the floating ice with a schwa sound. A green light flashed, and the 100th flying sword appeared beside him. "Go!" Yu Qianzhou shouted and waved both his arms. Green light shot out in all directions, and the huge floating ice on the surface of the ice immediately became the target of the flying swords. For a time the green light flashed and ding-ding-dang-dang sounds rang out incessantly. Not long after, the surface of the ice was covered with chunks of broken ice. Burn! Yu Qianzhou closed his eyes, opened his arms and muttered to himself. Boom! The 100 scattered flying swords instantly exploded into raging flames. The green and demonic raging flames instantly turned the cool world into a place that could burn everything. Not even a piece of ice could be found in the surroundings. The water that appeared instantly melted into the lake and created quite a bit of waves. Yu Qianzhou calmly stood on the surface of the water and didn't sink, moving up and down with the waves. When he put his hands behind his back, the green flames surged into his body, and the 1,000-mile lake returned to its original appearance. There were no floating ice, no raging flames, and everything was as it was before. Bai Changchun, who was sitting cross-legged in the house in the center of the island, smiled and slightly nodded his head. He opened his mouth and transmitted his voice, "Come here." This transmission was naturally sent to Yu Qianzhou. Yu Qianzhou, who was secretly enjoying the aftertaste of the lake, opened his eyes in a daze. The long sword on his back was unsheathed, and a cold light shot into the water, carrying him to the center of the island. Putting away the sword, he quickly walked into the main hall, bowed and said, "Master, you were looking for me?" Bai Changchun opened his eyes and expressionlessly said, "Yu Qianzhou, are you willing to sincerely worship me as your master?" "What is this? Didn't I already worship you as my master long ago?" Yu Qianzhou's face was full of doubt. Disciple is naturally sincere. "I will give you one more chance to choose. Think carefully. Once you truly become my disciple, there will be a heavy burden on you, and it will be difficult for you to escape for the rest of your life. Think carefully now, think carefully. Don't worry if you are not willing, I will not make things difficult for you. I will naturally let you out of the demon region, and from then on, there will be no more relationship between us." Bai Changchun said indifferently. "But, so I wasn't your real disciple before?" Yu Qianzhou's expression was a little strange and he asked, "Master, disciple has something to ask you." "Speak." Bai Changchun replied. "Dare I ask, Master, was the previous Crane Li your real disciple?" Yu Qianzhou hesitated for a while but still opened his mouth. This question was very important to him. If the Crane Li had the same status as him, then it would not be a big deal. However, if the Crane Li was Bai Changchun's real disciple as a master, it would be very difficult for him to accept the fact that his disciple was killed, even if the disciple had made a huge mistake. He never thought of himself as a good person, but he always had his own bottom line, and he had his own judgment of right and wrong. There were some things that he could pretend to be courteous but he could not accept. The crane Li was originally a white crane that the previous punishment envoy raised on Obedient Island when I took over the demon region. After he cultivated to become a spirit, he became my mount, and after taking human form he became my disciple. He was not a real disciple in the sense of a master and disciple. He's the same as you right now. He's just a nominal disciple of mine. I've never taught him anything, so we're not truly master and disciple in the truest sense of the word. Do you have any more questions? Bai Changchun's tone was very calm. Hearing this, Yu Qianzhou heaved a sigh of relief, but he still asked in doubt, I have not been in contact with you for a long time, but the crane Li has been with you for so many years. Why did you not take him as your disciple? There's no why, no why. Bai Changchun looked at him and said slowly, the reason is very simple. He is too distant and cares too much about the difference between humans and demons, so he became disloyal. I knew this a long time ago, and it was not because you exposed me. However, he has been with me for many years and I have always given him opportunities. Otherwise, I would have killed him long ago, and you would not have had the chance to do it. So that was why. Yu Qianzhou nodded and continued to ask, you just said that after becoming your true disciple, I will have a heavy responsibility, and it will be difficult for me to get rid of it for the rest of my life. Can I know what this heavy responsibility is? No, this is something my disciple should know. You do not have the right to know and you do not need to know. Bai Changchun refused without hesitation and asked, have you thought it through? I will ask you one last time, are you willing to take me as your master? Faster, thief. Such an important question. If you don't tell me, what if you send me to my death? Yu Qianzhou thought about it and still felt that following him had more advantages than disadvantages, so he bowed deeply and said, this disciple is willing. Bai Changchun nodded with satisfaction and stretched out his hand to point in front of him and said, kneel, perform the ceremony of taking me as your master. At this time, Yu Qianzhou's mentality was a little desperate, and he took a few steps forward, kneeled down and cupped his fists and said, this disciple greets master. After saying that, he kowtowed 3 times. Right, sit down. Didn't you want to know what kind of heavy responsibility you will have to shoulder? Sit down, master will slowly tell you. Bai Changchun pointed at the place where Yu Qianzhou was kneeling. Chapter 3:12. Yu Qianzhou sat cross-legged and Bai Changchun asked, what do you think of my cultivation? The former smiled and said, I can't say, but it's very high. It's the highest I've ever seen. The latter wasn't modest and nodded. After my cultivation level reached the late deity transformation stage, people at this level called me the #1 expert in the world. There were also people who called me the #1 expert in the cultivation world. Although such a title is somewhat suspicious, I believe that I still have no match in the deity transformation stage. I'm telling you this not to boast, but to let you know that it won't be a disgrace to you to have me as your master. Hearing this, Yu Qianzhou suddenly felt a little dizzy. The world's #1 expert and the cultivation world's #1, these titles were really awesome. Awesome people really deserved awesome titles. He knew that Bai Changchun's cultivation was high, but he hadn't seen other soul formation experts, so he couldn't compare. He didn't expect his master to be the world's #1 expert. He remembered that his first master Xianxia was only at the nascent soul stage, his second master was at the tribulation passing stage, and his third master was at the soul formation stage. His masters came one after another, and their cultivation levels were higher than the one before. Unfortunately, none of them taught him anything. He didn't know if he would have a fourth master, but this master was already the world's #1 expert. According to the speed of his progress, would he have to become an immortal's master in the future? Wouldn't it be a bit too shameless to always have a master like this? Who cares? Hirogua has more masters in the Condor Shooting League. He has more than 70 masters and I only have 3. It's not much. Didn't sage Confucius say that among 3 people, there must be a master? Damn it. I respect the ancient teachings more than the ancient teachings. Among 3 people, all of them are my masters. That's humble enough, right? With a reason to comfort himself, Yu Qianzhou smiled and said, Master, it's my honor to have you as my master. How can it be a disgrace to me? Bai Changchun nodded and didn't dwell on this topic. He asked, do you know the origin of this demon domain? Yu Qianzhou shook his head and said, I don't know, I'd like to hear the details. Have you heard of the war in the ancient times? Bai Changchun smiled and asked, Then do you know why there was such a war? Yu Qianqiu shook his head again. It has been more than 100,000 years since the war. At that time there was no demon domain. At that time humans, demons and ghosts coexisted and went their own ways. Until one day for some unknown reason the immortals from the upper realm came alone or in groups of 3 to 5. There were even many who came riding on divine beasts from the upper realm. One after another they descended into the human world and started fighting, causing chaos in the human world. Demons and ghosts ran amok and the people had no way to live. Under the temptation of the previous immortals, the cultivators in the human world also joined in, Bai Changchun said with a sigh. Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows and his expression was a little strange. Judging from the old man's expression, he didn't seem to be bemoaning the state of the universe and pitying mankind, nor was he worried about the misfortune of the common people. Why did it feel like he was born at the wrong time? Could it be that the old man had been a loner seeker for defeat for too long, and wanted nothing more than to be born in troubled times? At that time the masters of the cultivation world didn't know why the immortals of the upper realm were fighting each other. They only knew that they were fighting for something. Even the immortals of the upper realm were willing to risk their lives to fight for it. Naturally, it attracted more and more masters of the cultivation world to participate in it. As a result, the cultivation world was in a mess. Until one day another person came down from the upper realm. This person rode on the number 1 divine beast of the celestial realm. As long as there was a big fight in the mortal world, he would appear and join in the fun. The celestials who came down from the lower realm would run away as soon as they saw him. They were extremely afraid of him, and those celestials called him the Myriad Swords Demon Monarch. The Myriad Swords Demon Monarch? Yu Qianqiu suddenly frowned and muttered, "Master, I think I heard Wu Huagan, the son of the Wu clan's current master, mention this person before. He said that he could control tens of thousands of flying swords to fight against the enemy. I didn't expect that he was also an immortal of the upper realm." Yes, this person could indeed control tens of thousands of flying swords to fight against the enemy. At that time, none of the immortals were a match for him. They could only run away when they encountered him. Bai Changchun said with admiration, because the immortals only knew how to run away, he felt very bored, so he set up a heaven and earth formation and trapped all the immortals in it. He wandered around the mortal world, and whenever he felt bored he would run into the heaven and earth formation and find someone to fight with. One time the immortals who were trapped in the formation finally stopped hiding. They used a trick and joined forces to attack him. Finally he was seriously injured. When he returned to the outside world to recuperate, he saw that the mortal world was not peaceful, so he became kind. When he had free time he drove most of the demons and ghosts in the world together, which became the demons and ghosts domain of today. Yu Qianqiu was dumbfounded. He didn't expect that there was such a super awesome person who would beat up immortals to relieve his boredom. He asked in shock, "Master, you mean that the Eastern Holy Land and the demons and ghosts domain were created by him?" "Yes." Bai Changchun nodded, then suddenly shook his head and said, "Just when he was seriously injured, 2 people came down from the upper realm, but they were his sworn enemies. After a fierce battle, the demon monarch of 10,000 swords finally died. At that point the chaotic era of ancient times came to an end, and the world began to be dominated by humans." Yu Qianqiu suddenly realized something. He let out a breath and said, "Master, what did those immortals want to steal? Who got it in the end?" "The star pearl." Bai Changchun sighed and said, "It's said that it's a pearl formed by the power of the stars in the universe. It only appears once every 100 million years. Whoever can fuse with it can become a god. A god is an existence that surpasses the immortals of the upper realm. They are unrestrained, immortal and live forever. As for who got the star pearl in the end, no one knows. No wonder even the immortals wanted to steal it. So there's such a good treasure." Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. He rubbed his chin and thought to himself, "If only I could get it." There was an old saying that went, "You don't know how lucky you are when you are blessed." It was probably referring to people like him. It's time to let your imagination run wild. But he didn't think about the golden pearl that made him who he was today from immortal. "That's right, Master." Yu Qianqiu suddenly asked, "Didn't they say that the demon monarch of 10,000 swords came down to the mortal world with him? What kind of divine beast is it? Where did that divine beast go?" "It's a dragon. Said to be a red dragon. As for where it went, no one knows. It probably died at the hands of the demon monarch of 10,000 swords, 2 sworn enemies. Bai Changchun sighed. Dragon? A red dragon? F***ck your grandma. Can't be that coincidental, can it? Yu Qianzhou's expression twitched and his eyes widened. The scene he saw under Twilight Valley's green fire appeared in his mind. The scene that scared him so much that he had to crawl and run for his life seemed to be that of a red dragon, and it even talked to him passionately. Chapter 313. Just as he was considering whether to tell his master about the dragon with the aura of a bastard, Bai Changchun said, Yu Qianzhou, if I pass on the position of torture master to you one day, will you accept it? Yu Qianzhou was stunned and immediately forgot about the dragon. He thought to himself, I'll find a chance to figure it out first. He rubbed his hands with a smile and said modestly, Master, you must be joking. With my current cultivation, how can I take over the demon ghost region? Yes. With the mysterious skill you practice, it shouldn't be a problem if you have the cultivation of the tribulation passing stage. Unfortunately, I don't have that much time to wait. It seems that I'll have to ask Nongzhu to help you for a while. Bai Changchun sighed. Rest in peace, Healy. Your unfinished business will be completed by me. Yu Qianzhou prayed silently in his heart and asked, Master, who is Mr. Nongzhu? Why do you think so highly of him? Bai Changchun smiled and said, He is a cultivator at the middle stage of deification. He lives in the purple bamboo forest in the South Sea and occasionally goes to the secular world to play. The previous torturer of the demon region had originally chosen him to take over, and he reluctantly agreed. However, because he was carefree and lazy by nature, and because I appeared at the right time, he tricked me into coming to the demon region. Due to fate, I became the torturer of the demon region. Purple bamboo forest in the South Sea? Mr. Nongzhu is Guanyin Bodhisattva? Yu Qianzhou was confused and asked, Master, is Mr. Nongzhu a man or a woman? Of course he's a man, but he has a female disciple. If there's a chance, I'll ask you to go to the South Sea to visit him. After all, you still need his support after I leave. Bai Changchun was stunned and asked, Why do you ask? Oh, nothing, just asking. Yu Qianzhou scratched his head and said, Master, do you really have to go to the Holy East Land? I've heard from Healy that it's a very dangerous place. Very few people can come out after going in. Moreover, even if they go there, they might not be able to find a way to ascend to the immortal realm. I've heard Master talk about the ancient times. I'm sure that the immortal realm isn't comfortable either. Why go there to suffer? How can it be as free and unfettered as staying in the human world? Bai Changchun shook his head and said with a smile, I didn't go to the Eastern Holy Land to seek the method to ascend to the world of immortals. My life is nearing its end, so what I seek is to break through to the late deity transformation stage and attain immortality. Besides, as he said this, a strange look suddenly flashed in his eyes. Since immortals can live forever, I'm sure there are still a large number of immortals trapped in the Eastern Holy Land. Even if I can't obtain immortality, I still want to fight a great battle to my heart's content. It has been my wish for many years to be able to suffer a great defeat in my lifetime. Yu Qianzhou, ever since I reached the final stage of tribulation passing, I have never been defeated. It has been more than 2,000 years. You won't understand how I feel. Understood? How could I not understand? Isn't it just Duguchiobai? You make it sound so coquettish. You're obviously looking for excitement because your spirit is empty, yet you still have so many excuses. How great would it be if you had the time to enjoy all the beauties in the world? No one would be able to win you over. Looks like I'll have to find that Mr. Nongzhu and spar with him when I have time. He's one of my people. Yu Qianzhou muttered in his heart. He frowned and said, although Master's cultivation is invincible in the mortal world, to challenge an immortal, this Master, an immortal's cultivation must be extraordinary. What he meant was to advise his master to think twice before acting. How could an immortal be so easily bullied? Originally, I also thought that an immortal was very great. Bai Changchun suddenly snorted coldly and stood up. A hint of arrogance appeared on his aged face as he said, 200 years ago, I went to the periphery of the East Holy Land to investigate and coincidentally met an immortal who lived in the mortal world. After knowing his identity, I treated him with great respect and humbly asked him some questions. However, he was arrogant. In a fit of anger I fought with him. In less than half a day he died under my sword. An immortal is nothing more than this. He couldn't satisfy me to my heart's content. Because of this, I became even more determined to enter the East Holy Land. You're awesome. Even an immortal was killed by you. Pretend I didn't say anything earlier. Yu Qianzhou looked at him in shock and was completely speechless. It seemed that this master's confidence was extremely inflated. Yu Qianzhou, now you should understand what kind of heavy responsibility you have to shoulder. Bai Chongqun strolled to the door and said as he looked at the distant horizon. Yu Qianzhou stood up and followed him. He smiled bitterly and said, Master wants me to continue guarding the demon ghost region. He didn't know why, but now he was a little dispirited and uninterested in the matter that he originally yearned for. Bai Chongqun nodded and said, Not only that, but forget it, there are some things that you don't need to know for now. When I leave I will naturally tell you. Now I need you to do 2 things. Master, please instruct me. Yu Qianzhou said respectfully. Bai Chongqun said without turning his head. First, go to the demon ghost region and find a reliable person to help you plant the deficient flame profound fruit. You can choose anyone in the demon ghost region. You shouldn't spend your time on this. Second, after you finish the first thing, go to the South Sea Purple Bamboo Forest and find Nongzhu. When you arrive, she will understand what I mean. She will arrange some things for you to do. Take this opportunity, the 2 of you can get to know each other. This disciple understands. Yu Qianzhou agreed and thought, the first thing is easy. Tomorrow the Demon King and the Ghost King will gather together. I can choose one at random. Presumably, as long as I say it, there will be a lot of people who want to come. Doing the second thing will give me a chance to go back and have a look. It has been a month. I don't know what the situation outside is now. Just as he was thinking, he suddenly heard Bai Chongqun snorting coldly. He looked up and followed his gaze. He didn't know what was happening in the distance. The clouds in the sky were actually circling, and he could faintly see the flashing thunder and lightning. Yu Qianzhou was stunned. Isn't that where Miss Mu is? He couldn't help asking, Master, what's going on there? A ghost cultivator has broken through to the final stage of the Ghost King and is crossing the tribulation. Bai Chongqun said, suddenly looked back at him and asked, In the demon domain, the real Demon King and the Ghost King are gathering in that place. Did you do it? Yu Qianzhou nodded awkwardly and said, After the Demon Kings and the Ghost King know that I have become your disciple, they all want to meet me. I can't bear to refuse their kindness, so I designated a meeting place for them and plan to meet them tomorrow. Master, if you think it's inappropriate, I will ask them to leave now. You don't need to ask me for this kind of thing. You have the right to do it yourself. After saying this, Bai Chongqun returned to his original position and sat down cross-legged. He closed his eyes and rested calmly. Yu Qianzhou secretly heaved a sigh of relief. The old man had delegated the power to him. As long as he didn't act recklessly, he should be fine. Speaking of which, Yu Ji received the news that Yu Qianzhou was going to gather all the Demon Kings and the Ghost King in the demon domain. She was overjoyed. This time she must remind Yu Qianzhou of what he had promised her. She was really afraid that he would forget it, so she rushed over a day earlier. As soon as she arrived at Miss Mu's stronghold, she found that there were people who had arrived earlier than her. Some even arrived nearly 10 days earlier. Those who came were guests. As the owner of this place, and in addition to the fact that it was Yu Qianzhou who had ordered her to come, Miss Mu naturally warmly welcomed the Ghost King and the Demon King. As soon as Yu Ji sat down in the stronghold, her expression suddenly changed. She secretly cursed, "This is bad." Her cultivation level was originally at the mid-stage of the Ghost King, but she had broken through to the late stage of the Ghost King some time ago. Based on her calculations, she would be undergoing the heavenly tribulation within a year. Who knew that the heavenly tribulation would suddenly come today? The Demon Kings and the Ghost King were all experienced people, so they naturally understood what was going on. Miss Mu quickly led Yu Ji to an open space far away from the stronghold. Although she was afraid that the stronghold would be affected, she was also helping Yu Ji. This was all she could do to help Yu Ji. If anyone interfered, Yu Ji would have to endure an even more powerful heavenly tribulation. At this moment, a group of Demon Kings and Ghost Kings were standing in the distance watching. The dark clouds in the sky were as black as ink, and ferocious bolts of lightning flashed across them. As more and more lightning bolts appeared, the wind howled, and with a loud boom, a strong light finally converged and fiercely struck down. Yuji, who was on the ground, was like a duckweed in the wind, struggling to resist the lightning bolts that were constantly striking down. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.